An empty church, and only one figure in a black dress, is inside thinking about her loss. The boy Kael, who is her last hope. A large amount of money buys status, and the heroine becomes a noblewoman. It is on this day, when the main characters of the novel get married, that Kael makes his first suicide attempt. And therefore, Estia will take everything into her own hands and save him. And then, if the girl wishes, she and Kaelis could go to the domain together. It was a surprise for Estia that her lover invited her to go on a trip with him. Kael noticed how this proposal delighted and excited the heroine, who didn't even immediately believe this was happening in reality. But because the Marchioness didn't give an answer to the proposal for a long time, her husband thought that she simply did not want to. But Estia immediately questioned Kael's thoughts, explaining her uncertainty by saying she simply wanted. She doesn't want to interrupt her beloved's rest. It turned out that among others, there are rumors that the Marquis is sick, and that's why his wife does everything for him. So that in any case, she needs to appear somewhere. After these words, Estia decided that it was because she had mismanaged the estate. But her husband convinced her when he praised the heroine, because all the residents were very grateful. And Kael himself was too. It seemed to the Marquis that the heroine reminded him of his past, when he was willing to do anything for love. So he decided to respond to her efforts by offering to go this week. But on the heroine's way, there is an obstacle, Diana, who is waiting for an apology. And although Estia would happily choose the trip, she might get into trouble then. And then the heroine decided that she needed to ask for forgiveness as quickly as possible, so she could then travel peacefully with her beloved. Diana greeted Estia with words that she didn't even expect an apology from the Marchioness. So she was surprised by how quickly the girl requested an audience. The girl hopes to have the chance to save her beloved and does not want to lose it. But no matter what Her Majesty said, it was clear that she was still expecting what was happening now. As a result, the Marchioness quickly apologized and said it was time to leave, because she was in a hurry to leave for the trip. But the princess stopped the girl with words that she had recently prophesied to Helios that Her Majesty would die soon. And then she asked if the heroine had seen anything else about this. This question was asked because last night Her Majesty suddenly felt dizzy and fainted. But the saint was nearby and used her healing powers. And then Estia suddenly asked Her Majesty if she was having trouble with her superpower. To which Diana reacted very clearly, repeating that she had no problems. After this, the Marchioness said she had a vision where Diana's powers were getting weaker and weaker. And soon they would disappear completely, without a trace. The saint began to argue with Estia, saying that this ability was given to her by God. So the Marchioness doesn't even understand what she is talking about. But the heroine explained to Her Majesty that she was simply relaying what she saw. And she wasn't embellishing anything, because God also gave her strength. Estia told Diana that she didn't even know how to convey this information to the Crown Prince. But Her Majesty started to say that she would tell him everything herself, so let the Marchioness keep it secret for now. Then the heroine assured the princess that if she didn't want to, Estia would not communicate this prediction to Helios. Diana always took Kael's care for granted, and therefore never looked at him the way he looked at her. With love. In the end, the girl gave the saint advice on how to keep her secret longer. And then she left thinking about how the main couple of characters would survive this crisis. Diana believed she was special, because that's what she had been told all her life, so she had no doubts that God would not abandon her. And the next day, as planned, Kael and Estia left on a trip. But they didn't go like that, but to look at the land of Ilion, which is an important place of events from past years, where the Marquis fell in love with the saint again and again. Therefore, Estia was very worried, because they were going to a place full of Diana's memories, which could cause pain to the heroine's loved one. Kael thought that the Marchioness disliked the place they were going to so much that his wife started to get nervous about it. Ilion has a rich area along a large river with developed trade. This city is full of life, as it is known for its bustling streets and proximity to the empire's capital. And then Hestia repeated the words spoken by Diana in the past, that in this place it feels like people live and work their hardest, impacting Kael, who didn't understand how his wife knew the words spoken by the princess. It was then that the Marchioness realized that she had unknowingly said Diana's line from the original story. And then the carriage shook, and due to this, Hestia's ribbon got a little wrinkled. So Kaelis immediately tried to straighten the girl's jewelry. There are guards at Kael's house who are suspicious of Hestia and do not want to let her see the hero without reason. And then a stone fell under the carriage wheel again, so the heroes shook a little again. And because of that, they found themselves in an awkward position. And while Asgestia was embarrassed by the distance Kael was from her now, the man, meanwhile, decided to continue asking questions about the girl's strength. Because it turns out that she can foresee things as small as ordinary dialogue. The Marquis guessed that the heroine had already foreseen that he was in this city with Diana. The heroes went to a place Kael called an entertainment spot, where you can do whatever you want. And then they added that more than 20 people could come there, and were ready to start work. The girl was happy that on his estate there was such a good place, next to which transport had developed, and a warehouse large enough to store materials. And then the Marquis asked his wife if she had gathered all the soap makers. However, they all expressed their disapproval, because for them soap is a work of art. And it is unpleasant for them to make a lot of soap at once. Even Quimmer helped the heroine in the search for artisans, but even he could not find anyone. So Kael will have to join the search. However, Estia began to try to persuade the Marquis not to help her. Because she might exaggerate, but she noticed that he should help her because he is her husband. But then the spouse's dialogue was interrupted to report that a visitor had arrived at the workshop. It turned out that this visitor was the head of Elion, who was worried that the heroes had not arrived. And something had happened, because they did not arrive at the residence where they were expected. Even after saying that the heroine has an important message for the young man. No one will let her in. Kael noticed that the girl was friendlier to the city mayor than to him, her husband. After this, the chief asked why they were going to the workshop, and the Marquis explained that it was for his wife to see the place she was going to use. Since the heroine is going to use this workshop, the chief decided to prepare all the equipment that will be necessary. All the sleepless nights Estia spent were not in vain, because the heroine took good care of the estate's affairs and, thanks to her, the embankment is now perfectly restored. After all, the embankment was destroyed by a flood, after which the main characters fell in love. But fortunately, Ilion suffered minor losses. After the conversation, a discussion of issues followed, and Kael was allowed to familiarize himself with the construction record and the accounting records. It was an unexpected fact for the Marquis that his wife took care of all the affairs herself. So he also handed her the report to read. The young man noticed how hard Estia works and how diligently she learns new things. After reading the report, the Marchioness gave the city mayor a series of instructions related to the embankment. And after that, the heroine was offered to look at the embankment itself, for which the girl worked so hard. But nothing can stop the girl, so they resort to a distraction, tricking the guards that Saint Diana is behind them. Estia rejected this proposal because she feared that for the Marquis, this place was full of bad memories. But the man himself agreed to this walk. The hero explained his desire by saying that, since this is the result of Estia's efforts, then it is necessary to examine it, and besides, this place has always been very picturesque. And another reason was that Kael wanted to appear with the girl as the married couple they were. Therefore, Kael extended his hand to his wife with the words that they should go together. Because he so wishes. At that moment, the heroine admitted that being reborn in Gestia's body was a real dream for her. Especially on this day spent with her beloved. For Gestia it seemed like a real dream, because she walked arm in arm with Kael while others kept their distance from them. The heroine understood that that place was full of memories for her husband. And the only thing she could do for him now was to wait, following the Marquis's slow pace. And then the young man clarified that probably Jessie already knows that he was walking here with Diana. Because nothing can be hidden from the heroine. And then Estia let it be known that since she knows everything, then her husband cannot pretend before her that everything is fine. As the heroine expected, all of Kael's thoughts at that moment were occupied by memories of walks with Diana. Who was such a good person to the man that she illuminated everything around him? The security is a ruse and Estia still manages to get in. But in the end, the Marquis noticed that the girl felt uncomfortable with these conversations. But she calmed him down because thanks to the saint, Kael was able to have the precious experience of love. But in her heart, Estia hated the princess because she was always sure she was right. But her way was not always the right one. Diana always sees life simply, so the girl suggested that Kael also try to live a simple life. And then the Marchioness noticed that her beloved was laughing at her, which greatly embarrassed the heroine. Due to the girl's energy, her hair started to get messy, so the young man moved closer to her and gently smoothed it. And then he admitted to Estia that he was grateful to her for many things. So the man thanked her for everything the girl had done for him. Having said words of gratitude, the Marquis began to move closer and closer to Estia, which made her blush from head to toe. It turned out that Kael was moving so close to finally smooth his wife's hair, and then tie the ribbon so that the wind would no longer bother her. But the girl was also surprised by the fact that the Marquis used Estia's hairpin, that she left it here for him, which means he kept it all this time. The girl was embarrassed that when her beloved started coming closer, she didn't think at all that he was going to fix her hair. The girl intends to prove to her beloved that Diana does not deserve what he did for her. And as a result, the heroine catches him right before he attempts suicide. Meanwhile, the Marquis himself noticed that the renovated embankment looks solid, and all this is thanks to the heroine timely submitting the correctly approved budget. Estia was happy that her husband noticed all her efforts because she does all this only for him. Kael has no idea how many times he should thank his wife because she has done so much for him. The girl listened to the Marquis, as if not believing what she heard, because she was very happy with the man's words. And then, the heroine realized that she could not leave the novel just because the meaning of Estia's presence in it lies in her beloved Kael, whom she helps in every way. And while the girl was thinking about the meaning of existence, the Marquis suggested that she return home. The Marchioness understands that she is the one who should thank her husband, and not the other way around, because he has given meaning to her life. With such thoughts, the girl followed her beloved, who made her very happy. Estia understood that, for her, the main character of this novel was only Kaelis, and everyone else was just meaningless text. And a few days later, she asked the Marquis about this trip, because most likely rumors had already spread that Kaelis and his wife went to Ilion. Estia is willing to do anything to convince her beloved to commit such a reckless act. But for Estia, this question was a surprise, so she asked how Madame knew about this. And then the girl found out that in high circles, everyone talks only about spouses. The Marchioness was surprised at how quickly rumors spread, even though the trip had only recently taken place. At that moment, the girl realized that Madame was very curious about the story of her date with Kael. So she started talking about it. Estia had to explain to Madame Harmonia that the heroine and her husband did not have a date, but only to see the workshop, and on the way they also inspected their possessions. Then Madame remembered that de Quimmer was looking for soap makers for the Marchioness, because the girl plans to open a soap factory of her own production. But the problem is that all artisans are stubborn, and it is difficult to convince them to work in mass production. This fact greatly upset Estia, because without qualified workers, her plan could not come true, leaving only a chimera. Madame Harmony felt sorry for the girl and immediately offered help in finding workers. But the Marchioness refused, explaining that everything was fine and that she no longer needed help. Kael clearly did not expect this, and was paralyzed, not knowing what to do or say at that moment. And all because Kael had already started helping the heroine, and, as if by magic, 2 artisans were quickly found who decided to bring their students. Moreover, when the method of mass soap production is fully established, it will be better to hire the inhabitants of the slums and pay them an allowance. Everything will run like clockwork in the workshop when the artisans and apprentices finish developing the technology, and the poor will then be able to get a job. Madame Harmony was amazed at how easily the Marquis himself solved such a problem. Kael must value his wife greatly, as she helped him a lot and even went with him to Alien. Business with the soap factory is going well right now, and all thanks to the Marquis. Despite all the noise Estia made at Diana's tea party, Harmonia, who was very close to the saint, sent the heroine a letter with a story about the temple. And while Estia was thinking, the lady was happy about how well everything was going with the soap factory. It occurred to the Marchioness that the relationship between Harmonia and Her Majesty might change somehow. So she decided to find out at all costs. Subsequently, the heroine thanked the lady for the letter, warning about the condemnation of the temple. And then she apologized for not sending a reply because she was very busy. Having gained noble status, Estia goes to the ball where she meets the beautiful Diana, who is the main protagonist of the novel. The suicide attempt is stopped, and all that remains is to convince the hero not to try again. Because now there is a girl by his side who is ready to take care of him. The girl asked if anything happened to Harmony during the time they were not communicating that the Marchioness did not know about. In the end, it turned out that the reason Madame wanted to meet Estia was the Crown Prince's wife. So the girl asked what had happened to Diana since Harmony went to her. Madame admitted that she would not tell this to anyone other than the Marchioness, but Her Highness is still not used to living in the imperial family. And in this Diana is hindered by her very simple character. It was very unexpected to hear these words from Harmony, who had always been on the saint's side, protecting her in every possible way, so something really bad must have happened. And the reason for Madame's words was that there were rumors about Madame Merope's decision to leave the imperial palace. She, who was practically the guardian of the imperial palace, decided to leave her home, which turned out to be a shock to Estia. And although the emperor and the crown prince immediately stopped Merope, her intentions remained just as firm. Therefore, Madame Harmony began to think that all this was happening precisely because of Diana. The Marchioness agreed, recalling that at Diana's tea party she didn't feel Madame Merope's hand. So perhaps she and the princess had quarreled. Taking everything into her own hands, Estia decided not to beat around the bush, but immediately said that she wanted to become the Marchioness of her beloved. Madame Harmony thought so too, because all this cannot be a simple coincidence. Merope must have decided that she could no longer cope with Her Majesty, and, due to her advanced age, she might also be mentally exhausted. Although Estia wanted to ruin Diana's reputation, it turned out that the saint herself handled it much better. Her Majesty should be told to be more careful in balancing herself, because the role of a lady is becoming more and more important. Due to the situation that had happened, Madame Harmony could not find a place for herself. Because she was the one who always supported the crown prince's wife in everything. It was noticeable how Madame's attitude towards Her Majesty had changed, which was very unusual for such a kind heroine as Harmony. Even one of those who always treated the saint well began to doubt her actions, which was one of Estia's small victories, and due to this behavior of Her Majesty. Madame Harmony had a request for the Marchioness. Madame Harmony herself abandoned Diana and asks Estia for a favor, so what was happening was surprising to the girl. Estia was already imagining how Madame would ask her for something similar to a request for help to leave the crown prince's wife. Or something similar. Here we meet Euros, who is Kael's butler. He replaced the hero's parents and always took care of him. But the heroine's dreams did not come true, because instead of abandoning the saint, Madame asked Estia to speak directly with Diana. The girl was already starting to think it was just her imagination, because she expected something completely different. Estia even had to ask again if she would definitely need to do this, and if it would be precisely with the crown prince's wife, Her Majesty Diana. Madame's request was that the Marchioness simply talk to the saint, which did not fit at all with the heroine's recent thoughts. However, Estia remembered that Her Highness moved away from her because of the incident at the tea party. Because during it, the princess felt very offended by the heroine. But Madame began to convince the Marchioness that one mistake did not mean that Kael's wife could no longer take care of the saint. After all, according to Madame, Only the girl can influence Her Majesty, and even the only one who dares to speak directly to Diana. This information was so unexpected for Estia that it took her a minute to grasp it. And think about it. The lady understands that such a sudden request caused difficulties for the Marchioness, because everything was too unexpected. But Harmony could no longer remain silent, because lately Her Highness has somehow become sharper. And what used to pass calmly, Diana now perceives with sharpness and excitement. The butler, just like our heroine, hoped that Kael could cope with a broken heart and move on with his life. The lady herself also tried to speak to Her Majesty, but the girl, without hearing anything, simply left. Diana cannot continue in the same spirit, because at this rate, the saint will quickly lose her authority. Therefore, the person whom the Crown Prince's wife needs most now is Estia, because it is she, in Madame's opinion, who has earned Her Highness's trust. The Marchioness herself decided that Madame Harmony had gone mad saying such unlikely things. Meanwhile, Madame kept looking hopefully at the girl, who did not understand why she should tell Her Majesty anything. Most likely, Harmony developed such faith in Gestia precisely after the tea party, because then the heroine proved that she could say what she thought in front of Diana without fear of anything. But on the other hand, it turns out that Diana's condition is so bad that she doesn't even listen to Madame Harmony. If you think about it this way, it was the Emperor and Helios who said they would not allow Madame Merope to leave the palace. This means that it seems Diana is not at odds with her husband in this case, judging by the fact that the Crown Prince has not yet called Estia to his place. He still doesn't know what is happening now with his wife's divine power. But instead, Euros found a mess in the room, his master with a knife at his throat, and an unknown girl who simply burst into the house. After reflecting on the whole situation, the Marchioness began to devise another brilliant plan about what to do with all this information. And then the heroine told Harmonia that she could not resist such a heartfelt request. And then Madame promised that she would also help Estia in return when she needed help. It would be hard to dare to refuse Madame's request because she gives lessons to Diana. So it is necessary to maintain a good relationship with her. And the best thing is that, after fulfilling this request, Madame Harmony will be indebted to the Marchioness. But Estia's only thought was that she would not help Diana, not even under threat of death. And at that moment, Madame was thinking about how good the Marchioness was. Meanwhile, the Crown Prince was alone in the lily garden, flying somewhere among the clouds. It turned out that Helios still could not believe that Merope, who had been with the young man since childhood, really left after so many years. Madame Merope took the place of the deceased Empress Mother and took care of Helios until he grew up. Merope was not just a servant, but a full-fledged member of the Crown Prince's family. That's why Helios burst into Madame's room asking if she was really leaving. And to top it off, this unknown girl proposed marriage to the Marquis, which no one expected. And the Crown Prince found the imperial palace maid, collecting all her belongings that she put in suitcases. Then Merope said that she prayed to God every day that His Highness would become a merciful ruler and, therefore, God would take care of the Crown Prince without Madame. Helios asked Madame Merope if Diana was to blame for her unexpected departure. In response to this, Madame replied that she was simply tired of what she was missing. His Majesty noticed how faithful Merope was as a person, because she did not announce that it was his wife who made Madame leave. Old-fashioned ladies have always been a focus of authoritarianism and luxury for Diana. So the heroine always argued with Merope. That's why His Majesty organized that tea party as an occasion to declare her beliefs. However, since Diana is the first member of the imperial family to entertain influential nobles, Merope in no case could allow her dignity to be insulted. The Crown Prince understands that everyone already knows that it was Diana who made Madame leave, even though Merope said nothing about it. Like Harmonia, Helios began to notice changes in his wife, as she even stopped taking care of the garden where he walked at that moment. The heroine decides that she will never allow Kael to die again, so now she decides not only to watch from the sidelines, but also to join the game. Although His Majesty used to spend a lot of time on this, the reason is that when he sees beautiful flowers, he feels at peace. In those days, the saint told Helios that he was very often worried, so it would be good if he also calmed down when looking at the flowers. Then the couple was having fun, and Jelly asked Diana what to do if she still didn't feel better looking at the flowers. And when in the Crown Prince's memory, the saint told him that in this case, she would appear behind him. Then in real life, at the same moment, Estia called him. Because Helios did not see the face of the one who called him, at first he thought it was his wife. For a second, His Majesty even believed he saw his beloved calling him. However, it was not Diana at all, but Estia who continued trying to shout to the Crown Prince. The Crown Prince continued to wander in his thoughts, and the girl even began to worry that something had happened. Meanwhile, Helios kept thinking about Diana, who told him she would comfort him. And then the Crown Prince finally realized that the Marchioness had been standing in front of him all this time. But all the girl's confidence disappears as soon as the Marquis begins to speak. Estia was surprised by the reaction with which the prince received her. And the heroine already started to think that she had come in vain. The voices of the girls are completely different, so Helios decided he was crazy to confuse them. In the end, the Crown Prince was still able to sort out his thoughts, and asked what the Marchioness would be doing here if she hadn't come to Diana. And the reason was that, although Estia received a request from Madame Harmony, the heroine did not intend to meet with Her Majesty. In dialogue with her, Estia visited the imperial palace only because she specifically wanted to talk to Helios. Although the Marchioness did not expect to meet him in the garden on the way to the office. It was written on the Crown Prince's face that something had happened, and then the heroine realized that it was because of Madame Merope, or because of the Emperor's health. It was a stroke of luck for the Crown Prince to meet Estia because he wanted to ask the heroine a question. And then the Marchioness thought that this was related to the problems of Her Majesty's saintly power. But contrary to expectations, the Crown Prince asked if it was true that Kael finally went out to inspect his possessions. And when the Marchioness said that she and her husband had decided to go together, Helios was happy that his friend's condition had improved. But instead of the expected answer, Estia only heard a laugh, which suddenly began to sound from her love's lips. But Estia dispelled the Crown Prince's dreams, saying that a doctor accompanied them on this trip. Which means that things were still not so well. The heroine was outraged by the fact that while Helios was having fun with Diana, he didn't care about Kael's condition, and when His Majesty found himself alone, he immediately decided to show his involvement. But after meeting the Crown Prince, it became clear that the saint kept her secret. And she wasn't sharing it with her husband. And then Estia wondered how long His Majesty would keep the prediction about his powers a secret. And although the heroine was thinking about something completely different, she thanked Helios for being so concerned about her husband. And then she added that today the Crown Prince doesn't look the same as always, because he looks annoyed and tired. But this is understandable, because Helios is probably very worried about His Majesty, the Emperor, and his well-being. And when the prince asked what the girl was talking about, she explained that his wife told him everything that happened to the Emperor. And although His Highness immediately managed to use his holy power, her husband still looks pale and anxious. Estia was the first to know what was going to happen, so there was no point in hiding anything from her. Kaelis laughs at this whole situation and asks if he seems so frivolous. Then Helios said that although his father had received the divine power from Diana, he still found it difficult to move at that moment, which means that His Majesty had not fully recovered yet. The heroine said she knew it would be like this, which greatly surprised the Crown Prince, because he didn't understand what she meant by saying she knew. Surprised, the Marchioness asked His Majesty if his wife really hadn't told him anything. But Helios only clarified what his wife had to do with this, and then the heroine added more fuel to the fire, saying that, judging by the man's words, his wife still hadn't told him anything. If so, then Estia's prediction came true, and the girl said that she would no longer bother His Majesty with this. Subsequently, the Marchioness only heard Helios's question about how she dared to abandon her duty to the Crown Prince. Finally, the heroine only added that sooner or later Her Highness would reveal herself to her husband. Estia admitted to the prince that she was worried that Diana would not tell him about such an important event. And she also kept silent about the problems the saint had with Madame Merope. And it was unclear who had greater authority in the palace, because although the emperor and his son persuaded Madame to stay, she still left because of Her Majesty. His Majesty ordered the Marchioness to stop saying such things, because he would no longer tolerate such nonsense. Diana is so beautiful that it's as if our heroine's heart burst out of her chest and left her breathless. What a surprise everyone got when, in the end, the Marquis told the heroine to do whatever she wanted. And then Estia said that Helios had made too many mistakes, and therefore, she was very sorry. The Marchioness would not have let such words slip easily, so the Crown Prince began to wonder what Diana had to tell him. From the saint's behavior, it is not clearly apparent that she is hiding something, as she behaved as usual. And she always greeted her husband with a smile. His Majesty was about to serve his lover the tea he had prepared. But Helios stopped her because he approached her with a request. And the request was for Diana to also heal the emperor with her power, because he had not fully recovered yet. It would seem like such a simple action for the saint, because it is only necessary to heal one person. But it was clear how much she began to worry about this. But the girl quickly managed to put on a mask of calm, saying that Helios scared her with his tone. And then the saint promised that she would definitely visit her husband's father again at noon to help him with the help of her power. The Crown Prince apologized to his wife for distracting her, because perhaps she still had a lot to do. But Diana reassured him, because she herself wanted to do the same thing. However, the man wondered if this was too much, since his wife already uses her holy power on His Majesty in the morning and in the afternoon. For the girl, this was such a shock that she even asked if she had imagined all this. The answer was so surprising and unexpected. And then Diana said that if she had lost her power, then she would have to worry. But everything is in order, and the Crown Prince should not doubt God's power. His Majesty gave his word that the emperor will recover soon, so there is no need to worry about anything. Helios wanted to tell his wife something more, but couldn't, because he was interrupted by an unexpected knock on the door. The spouse's conversation was interrupted by a maid to inform them that the high priests were waiting in the hall. And then Diana went to a meeting with them, which was scheduled for that time. So the girl could not continue the dialogue with her husband. As the maid escorted Her Majesty before the high priests, she noticed that the princess was in a hurry, as if she were being chased. And the explanation for Diana's haste was that she was very scared by the dialogue about her powers. And that's why she tried to run away as quickly as possible. The saint began to worry that Estia might have already told her husband everything, who spoke as if he knew something. For a second, His Majesty had the idea to return and talk honestly about everything with Helios. But then he decided it wasn't the right time yet. While the girl was thinking about the whole situation, the servant noticed that something was wrong with the main character and tried to understand what happened. Of course, this greatly surprised Estia, despite the fact that she herself proposed marriage to him. But agreeing to marry a girl you see for the first time sounds too crazy. But Diana's thoughts were completely occupied with the fact that, although her powers had not completely disappeared yet when this happened, it would no longer be possible to hide the secret. Not only the princess was thinking about the situation at that moment, but also her husband, whom she left alone with his thoughts. The man did not understand how it happened that those he trusted were leaving. The emperor's health was deteriorating, and his beloved wife was suspicious. At first, it occurred to him that all this was happening because of Estia. But he quickly pushed it away from himself, because it was his problem that he couldn't complete his affairs. The Crown Prince is not used to getting out of trouble alone, because before he always had Kael with him, who helped him in everything. And then His Majesty decided that he urgently needed to meet with the Marquis, because he was the one who always found a way out of difficult situations. Meanwhile, Estia was happy that after the tea party, Countess Erinis finally called the heroine to her house. And she also wrote that she was grateful to the Marchioness for the Countess's friendship with Diana. But Irena's pride was hurt by the fact that Her Highness does not open her heart so easily to usual words or flattering gifts, and because of this, the Countess learned the news about Madame Merope later than Harmony. The Marchioness understood that Countess Irena's was not a friend to her, but a political ally. The Countess asked the heroine for advice, and she suggested, first of all, looking at Diana's entourage. And try to change it. And after all this dialogue, the Marquis simply leaves, leaving the heroine and the butler, who don't even know each other, to figure everything out further. And then, Estia remembered the Crown Prince, surprised that there was no news from him. Which means that the main characters could already solve all the problems. But even in this case, the Marchioness should have been summoned to the palace. As soon as the girl thought of Her Majesty, she found him along with her beloved, which she did not expect. Thus, the Marchioness found herself in a quiet mansion in the imperial capital, which was the secret villa of the prince that appears in the original work. For the novel, this was a historical place where the relationship between the heroes began to develop seriously as soon as Helios told Diana about this place. Estia does not understand why she ended up in this particular villa, and even with the two most important handsome men in the novel. The Crown Prince told Kael that they should leave to talk, and after the Marchioness's words that if something happened to her husband, she should call the girl immediately, he was very surprised that they considered him so dangerous. But Estia had a reason for her enthusiasm, because the last time Helios was alone with the Marquis, Kael suffered. In the end, it turned out that the girl ended up in that place because the Crown Prince wanted to meet somewhere. And since this is an official order from His Majesty to the Marquis, the man cannot simply ignore it. Estia was indignant because the Crown Prince ordered her husband to meet, because he feared that Kael would refuse a regular meeting. And since the heroine recently met with Helios, then perhaps he knows why he wanted to meet. And then the heroine explained that the prince was in a state of moral exhaustion. Kaelis wanted to relax and be alone with himself, so he simply scares away his butler and the girl he had agreed to marry. The heroine was angry with His Majesty because when Kael was going through a difficult time, Helios didn't even bat an eye, and when he himself had problems, he immediately wanted to see him. But Estia was angry so sweetly that Kael, on the contrary, began to calm down because of this. Estia was not going to let her beloved go alone, so she expressed her wish to go with him. Although the heroine was glad that the meeting did not take place in the palace, she was still angry about the fact that the prince chose this particular place, even though he has money for other secret places. The girl's emotion was so obvious that even Dr. Marquis Macarius noticed it, and began to assure Estia that Kael would definitely be fine. And although the conversation between His Majesty and the Marquis drags on, this means that Estia's husband began to feel much better. The doctor pointed out that if the Marchioness continues in the same spirit, it will no longer be her husband who will need treatment, but the heroine herself. As soon as Kael's wife began to think that her beloved was staying up too late, he left immediately. But he returned, unfortunately not in the best condition, because he was very pale and could barely stand. Meanwhile, the Crown Prince simply left, without even saying goodbye to the one he previously considered his best friend. Estia and Euro stood frozen, looking at each other and digesting what had just happened, because it turned out to be a shock for both of them. The doctor immediately offered the man medicines that would help relieve the tension. But Kael pushed the hand with the pills away. And while the heroine wondered what happened to her beloved, he clarified whether Hestia really demanded the land of Attica from Helios, possession of Duke Orcus. It turned out that Helios told the Marquis that the girl was demanding these lands and the title of Duke for Kael in exchange for her prediction. Hestia understands that her husband is now confused because she didn't tell the Marquis such important information. Kael directly asked his wife if she wanted the title of Duchess, and if not, if she was related to the returning Duchess. A few hours earlier, the Crown Prince and the Marquis had a dialogue, during which Helios apologized for summoning his friend to the meeting by order, because he simply feared that they would not want to see him. Then Kael asked what business he was called for, addressing Helios as Lord Crown Prince, which surprised His Majesty with its formality. And since even the Marquis has moved so far away from the main character, then the man has no one else to trust. And then Kael said that trusting someone is in fact a decision that a person makes by the power of their will. And then His Majesty, the Crown Prince, wondered if he could now trust Diana, who acted as if she were hiding something. The situation turned out to be quite unusual, so it is hard to believe in its reality and accept everything right away. And since Helios has no more questions for Kael, the Marquis hurried to leave the prince because his wife was waiting for him. Then the Crown Prince noticed that it seemed his friend really trusted Estia, even knowing what the girl was asking for in return for the prediction. As soon as His Majesty found out that the Marchioness had not informed her husband about this, he said that the heroine asked to make Kael a duke, the owner of the land of Attica, where the late Duke Orcus ruled. This information did not fit into Kael's head, because Estia did not seem greedy to him. And he was sure that she did not need riches, because she herself often repeated that she was not interested in property or finances. Kael decided that he should not have trusted his wife, because she could simply deceive him. And that's why he went to the heroine very angry. Then the Marchioness began to worry that she had brought her beloved to such a state. And she started panicking so much that the doctor decided to leave the couple alone. Estia decided to resolve this misunderstanding as soon as possible, so she began to explain that she had no connection with the late Duchess, and that she was doing all this so that the prince and his wife would apologize to her husband. The territory of Attica and the duchy are only necessary for the implementation of her plan. And the girl has no hidden goals. Kael asked on what basis he should trust someone who had already hidden important information from him. Without an oath, anyone could say such words, so Estia decided that she could swear that her beloved would believe her. After all the events, Estia and Euros finally introduced themselves and meet in a calm setting. Then the Marchioness began to tell Kael that she wanted him to become an indispensable support in this empire, so that his life would be great, because the country would not recover without her husband. The heroine also wants the main couple to bow their heads to the Marquis, and she will take care of everything for that. The Marquis's reaction to his wife's oath was that he simply took his hand from hers, and then told them to go home now. Due to her excitement, Estia remained in place, and Kael began to leave alone, which caught the attention of the doctor, who noticed that for some reason the Marquis had blushed a little. And then the man wondered if he could trust his wife, and recalled the words about trust that he himself had recently told the prince. After that day, Kael did not kick Estia out of his residence, but he no longer spoke to the girl. So the heroine lived under the same roof as her beloved, but without seeing him. And then, finally, samples of soap made by craftsmen arrived. And then Estia decided to dare to go to her husband to find out his opinion on the soap. But the girl didn't even have time to touch the door of Kael's office before he opened it, colliding with the heroine. Then the Marquis asked what Jessie was doing under his door, and she explained everything to him, saying that she just wanted to take a walk, which didn't sound convincing at all. A regular dialogue takes place, with the help of which Euros learns more about the one who will soon become his master's wife. And in the end, the heroine said that soap samples had arrived, and she wanted to show them to her beloved. Kael invited the girl into his office, and then noticed that the soap samples were received quite quickly. Meanwhile, Estia tried to understand her husband's mood, noticing that it had not worsened. And it seemed that he was not even avoiding the heroine. There were several soap samples, and they were all different, so the heroine asked Kael to choose the best one. Among the samples were unscented soaps, somewhat hard, not soft enough, and colored. And in the end, the Marquis decided that the soap should be hard and fragrant. Until now, soap was the exclusive property of the nobility and commoners, who admire nobles will surely want something similar. The heroine thanked Kael for the good advice, and then said that she would immediately send the answer to the masters. And then the Marquis wondered if common people would use the soap correctly, because they had never used it before. And therefore, they could not immediately get used to washing with it, so they had to come up with something to help them. After some time, Alina and Pamux, excellent actors, appeared at the Marquis's residence, whose beauty cannot be described with words, but who, besides their appearance, are widely developed and stage their own plays. The people in this novel think that illnesses are the anger or punishment of God. Even if they start using soap, this will not change their worldview. The girl expected to be scolded now for simply bursting in on the Marquis. But instead, she only heard gratitude in her direction because she saved Kaelus's life. Therefore, Estia decided to make an announcement with the help of actors that would convince the common people to use soap. So, the Marchioness called the most popular actors and explained the idea, which was that they could set an example for the people so that everyone would start using soap. However, the actors said they could not accept the heroine's patronage under such a condition. And all because Elian's play has already been written, staged, and planned. And in such a situation, it is a bit unreasonable to add new content at the last moment and revise the script and direction. Estia realized that she approached the actors too late, and then told them they could respond to this proposal later. The heroine explained her idea to the Marquis because many trends in food or clothing start precisely from plays, so the use of soap could become popular thanks to advertising. It was the amount Kael gave that was offered to the actors in the contract. But Estia herself was not sure if this amount was appropriate, because she knew nothing about the price of advertising in the novel. Moreover, in front of the girl there were actors who currently had the best reputation in the empire. And as soon as the actors saw the contract with the amount indicated there, they sharply changed their minds and accepted the announcement, thanking the Marchioness. And while Estia thought she overvalued the actors by giving such a sum, and he himself thought that it would be worth giving even more. Thanks to the inflated sum, Kaelia, Alina, and Pollux enthusiastically promoted the soap, coming up with many phrases that would interest the common people. But the girl was impressed not only by Diana, but also by Crown Prince Helios, who is presented to us as the main character. But Euros doesn't even realize that this previously unknown girl knows everything about the Marquis. And therefore, he wonders how she knew that Kael needed help. Due to the soap factory, the heroine faced even more tasks that took up almost all her time. So now the girl is very tired every day. Estia is happy with the fact that at least there are no classes with Madame Harmony or important social events, because the heroine has absolutely no time for this now. Recalling the social events, the Marchioness thought about how Countess Erinys was doing with persuading the young ladies around Diana. And then she thought that Helios would soon want to meet the Marchioness. And as the heroine thought, the Crown Prince really called her almost immediately after she thought this was about to happen. His Majesty, without even greeting Estia, told her that he did not trust the girl because of her clashes with Diana and her open hostility towards the prince. But despite all the Marchioness's actions, all her predictions were very accurate. And they turned out to be extremely important issues that could decide the fate of the empire. And signing some document, Helios added that the Marchioness forced him to admit that the empire needed her skills. All this led the Crown Prince to ask Estia to tell him everything the heroine talked about with Diana, because he was still tormented by the fact that his wife was hiding something from him. And then he added that the girl is obliged to tell him everything, because this is an order from the Crown Prince, and it cannot be disobeyed. Although the heroine made a promise to His Majesty to keep everything secret, she was ready to break it at any moment, so she began to tell the prince that she had made a promise to her wife. The girl has to find, in a matter of seconds, a reason to burst into someone else's house. And the main thing is that everything sounds convincing so as not to give herself away. Of course, Estia emphasized that Diana said that she herself would tell her husband everything, and ordered the heroine to remain silent. Then the prince learned that the Marchioness's prediction was that within the next 2 years, the healing power of Her Highness would completely disappear. In the original, the source of Diana's healing power is mentioned only once, in passing, saying that the saint, having observed the miserable life of the poor since childhood, prayed fervently to God and he, in turn, heard her prayers and granted her strength. No reason is given in the novel why Diana was given this power, and most likely it was because she was the main character. And then, the crown prince realized that the emperor would not get better, which means that all the words about His Majesty's recovery were a lie. The Marchioness asked what Helios plans to do next, to which he replied that he would wait for now. The crown prince told Estia that the next time she has premonitions, the heroine must first inform Helios of everything. The heroine understands that the only thing she can lose in 2 years is her life in the novel world, but not her abilities, which never existed. Meanwhile, at Estia's house, Euros brought her husband a letter that was written to the marquises from the theater actors sponsored by the hero. And since the Marchioness was at the palace at that time, Kael decided to read it himself to know what happened. Leaving everything to superpowers would be the easiest option, but it is unknown if this will have bad consequences. In this letter, Elena and Pollux wrote how grateful they were for the donations, because now they could create plays with an unequaled level of perfection. And in gratitude, the actors left Estia and Kael 2 tickets for the best seats, because they want the couple to come to the play screening, just in case the heroine has freed up some time, so they can both go to the show together. And after that, for the rest of the day, the heroine's thoughts were only occupied by the fact that she would go somewhere with her beloved. They had even started designing a dress for her, but Estia was only worried about the fact that attending a show together was like a date. As soon as the couple appeared at the theater, they were immediately greeted with joy by Elena and Pollux, thanking her for her time. Quimmer even created matching outfits for Estia and Kael, so going to the show became even more like a date. And then Elena called the Marchioness aside to tell her that noble people had attended the play, so both the performance and the advertising would be a success. Afterwards, the actors wished the couple a happy evening and hurried to the stage. The Marchioness realized that she wasn't here for a date, but for work matters. So she stopped worrying so much, feeling much calmer and more confident. Since there was no time to find more convincing answers, Estia decided to say that she could see the future. Kael noticed how in a few moments, the girl's attention suddenly diminished. And then he said that, if you think about it, this is the first event between him and Estia as a married couple. And then the Marquis put his wife's hand in his, and then they went to see the play together. The heroine was so surprised by this that all her words disappeared, and only emotions remained that she could not hide. Due to the girl's embarrassment, Kael could not take his eyes off her. But Estia herself did not understand why her beloved seemed to be laughing at her. In fact, the actors inserted an advertisement in which Elena's character said that the soap would make her smell noble in their play. In the announcement, the effect of the soap was slightly exaggerated, to which Kael commented. But the heroine explained to him that such an announcement should definitely work. The content of the play turned out to be quite simple. It spoke of a girl who was a commoner, but who knew how to deceive everyone and pass herself off as a noble lady. As a result, the main character of the play began to live with a false personality in a false world, which reminded Estia of herself. After all, the Marchioness in this world has become a minor fictional character, and not herself, and for now there is nothing in her that is not a lie. Estia became so sad from her thoughts that even the Marquis noticed her change in mood. But from the butler's gaze, it became clear that he was definitely not willing to believe it. The girl understands that she, like the main character of the play, cannot allow her lies to be discovered, because all this is done for the sake of her beloved. In the play, the heroine has a good ending, because there is someone who loves her, but if the Marchioness's deception is revealed, then she will have no one left in the novel world. And when the play ended and people started leaving, they encountered vendors shouting about discounts on the soap the heroine used in the play. Of course, Estia's plan worked, and everyone immediately rushed to buy the soap, because it had a wonderful scent and the product was also very cheap. It was a good idea to sell soap after a successful play, because products sell better while the impressions of the performance are fresh. If word of mouth works this well, tomorrow everyone will know about the soap sale in the department stores. Kael noticed how happy the heroine was and asked if the play was interesting to her. And then the girl realized that the Marquis himself didn't like something in the play. But the man didn't have time to finish his thought when he was interrupted by Alina and Pollux, who ran towards the couple. Alina started saying that this was the best audience reaction the actors received for their plays. And all of it was thanks to the Marquises, who supported and sponsored the performance. Alina and Pollux were not the only ones who came to thank Kael and Hestia because they followed the actors. And everyone else rushed to thank the Marquises, even for the soap. The heroine decided to go all the way and said something that others do not know to prove that she is not deceiving. But rather she sees the truth much more than an ordinary person. Due to the large number of people, Estia began to worry about Kael's condition. But when she turned around, she saw that he was simply standing to one side and was not worried about anything. Because, in his opinion, this is just because he doesn't care after all. He did nothing. And while the heroine listened to all the gratitude directed at her, the Marquis only admired her from afar, thinking about something of his own. Everyone asked Estia if she was interested in the play, and she answered yes. And her husband, meanwhile, thought that everything was a lie. After all, the hero noticed that his wife showed no reaction throughout the entire play. During the entire viewing of the performance, Estia was indifferent to everything, as if she had nothing to do with the girl. It was at this performance that Kael first saw the heroine have that expression on her face. The Marquis understands that he has chosen to trust his wife. However, he understands that the girl still hides many things from him. And the man began to wonder if he would wait for the moment when Estia trusted him and told him everything herself. After this event, Estia was very tired because she communicated with many people. The Marchioness noticed that her beloved was very lucky because he had escaped in advance. Because she herself was very exhausted by the general public approaching her. Now Euros begins to doubt that she is lying because she has information that almost no one knows. Kael noticed that the heroine had looked tired all day, and Estia explained everything by saying that she had been working too hard lately. But that now she had rested and should be better. But even in the cafe, the girl could not fully relax, because at the next table sat the aristocrats who were also at the show. And they were loudly discussing Pollux. But then the girl's topic of conversation changed, and they started talking about the fact that nowadays His Majesty, the Crown Prince, often goes out on business. The aristocrats assumed that something must have happened to the emperor, and most likely it was health problems. The girls were very surprised by this. Because how is it possible if a saint lives in the imperial palace, the wife of the crown prince? And although rumors spread very slowly, because quite some time has passed since the emperor's illness. But even at this rate, rumors will soon spread that Diana has problems with sacred power. And then Estia heard that there were rumors that the crown prince was a little tired of talking to his wife, of which Countess Erinis told the aristocrats. Erinis told everyone that Diana still forces others to live, as she believes is right. And although it is good news for Estia that her plan is working, she was also worried that Kael would find it difficult to hear this. But then the Marquis admitted that the temple teachings did not seem as good to him as they did to the crown prince's wife. It favors the girl that she perfectly remembers everything related to the novel, because this increases the chances of convincing the butler. These words surprised the girl because Kael now gave an assessment of Diana, which was not very flattering either, which Estia did not expect. And then Kael informed his wife that she must have an audience with His Majesty, the Emperor. So Estia decided to find out why her beloved needed a meeting with the Emperor. Because the girl herself had no idea about the reasons for this unexpected desire. The situation surrounding the couple did not portend such a confession from the Marquis, who then added that he had rested for too long, so it was time for the man to return to business. The girl was against this wish from her wife because, in her opinion, the hero had not yet fully recovered. So it was not necessary to return so quickly. Moreover, due to the emperor's health, the saint will always be with him, so if Kael goes to His Majesty, then it will be inevitable to meet the crown prince's wife. And if the Marquis sees Diana, due to this he may get worse again, and his condition has barely begun to improve. Then Kael assured his wife that His Majesty was no one else to him. And then the man added that he did not say he would go before the emperor alone, which surprised Estia, who asked him with whom he was going then. To the heroine's surprise, Kael pointed at her, implying that it would be his wife who would go with him before the emperor. Thus Euro learns that this was not the Marquis's last attempt to lose his life, which he no longer values at all. In the end, the couple went together to an audience with His Majesty the Emperor. The emperor was glad that Kael, who was like a son to His Majesty, brought him his wife. Upon returning from the cafe, the Marquis immediately requested an audience with the emperor about his return to business. Most likely His Majesty expected this, so he immediately sent a date for the audience. And the couple ended up going to the palace to meet the emperor. Kael greeted His Majesty and then introduced his wife Estia to him. Since His Majesty was like a father to the Marquis, Kael decided it would be a good idea to formally introduce his wife to him. Meanwhile, the Marchioness was surprised that her husband also came with Diana, whom the heroine expected to see. And although the main couple remained silent in front of the emperor, the girl was still worried about their presence. But still, looking at Kael, Estia began to think that everything would be fine because her beloved was getting better, and was even ready to return to his business. The emperor was surprised that Estia had become not only the Marquis's wife, but also his assistant in all matters. After the butler started listening to the girl's words, she promises that she will save Kael. His Majesty heard that the Marchioness was praised in Ilion and noticed that the girl was a very versatile person. Then the heroine said that these are just rumors that are always exaggerated, and then the crown prince added that even if this is an exaggeration, it strengthens over time and becomes truth. Estia wanted to remain calm, but as soon as Helios said something, she could no longer simply ignore the main characters. Then the crown prince realized that recently the Marquis was accompanied by his doctor everywhere. And now, suddenly, he wanted to return to business, although the question of whether his condition had improved remained open. And then, Helios suggested that it was Estia who influenced the Marquis, so he suddenly wanted to return. The girl was about to curse when Kael stopped her to calmly explain that his wife, on the contrary, was against such an early return because she was worried about her beloved's condition. And although the Marchioness tried to stop her husband, he managed to convince her that he was quite healthy. The heroine was shocked by these words from Kael because the man took her side in front of Diana, whom he had been deeply in love with for a long time. Estia didn't know what emotion she needed to show now to look natural and not feigned. And since we were talking about health, Kael decided to ask how His Majesty the Emperor was feeling at the moment, because the Marquis had heard that he had not been well lately. Estia is happy because at this ball she will be able to see all her favorite characters. The butler is in complete shock, but he has no choice but to listen to the stranger because his master's life is at stake, whom he has always cherished. The man explained that initially he didn't believe the rumors, but today the emperor was so pale that Kael was really starting to worry. And then the Marquis asked why Diana couldn't heal His Majesty with her divine power. Then the saint began to timidly talk about her ability. But the emperor did not allow His Majesty to finish, interrupting her and telling her that there was nothing to worry about. After all, His Majesty is getting older and nothing can be done about it. But the emperor, according to him, is much better than he looks. And all these rumors arose because the crown prince, instead of his father, is present at a cabinet meeting, but this is done so that Helios gains experience. And then Kael replied that it turns out he was worrying in vain, since the emperor was still in good health. And besides, next to him there was a saint with a healing gift. The reason why the Marquis insists on mentioning the emperor's health problems and the saint's healing power is because there he warns a couple of main characters that he knows their secret. Although Diana uses her sacred power on the emperor anyway, His Majesty's complexion is noticeably bad, which can immediately be said that the emperor is sick. What is surprising is that Kael dared to raise the issues of the emperor's health. and the strength of his majesty, which led to the thought that the Marquis and the Crown Prince broke all relations. And Estia's husband simply sent a warning to the main characters. Now, having received a warning, Helios and his wife should think about their future actions. Because at this moment, they can either become friends with the Marquises or call themselves their opponents. Estia explains the reason for her proposal to the Marquis, saying that all this is just to save his life. Because this way she will always be there, and at any moment she can prevent something that has terrible consequences. Estia noticed that this moment was ideal for realizing the heroine's next plan. So she approached the emperor with a proposal. When the girls started talking, the crown prince immediately guessed what the Marchioness was referring to. So he tried to stop her, but the attempt was a failure. And Estia's proposal was the desire to make her beloved a duke. After the meeting, when the couple was already traveling in the carriage, Kael asked his wife how she could even mention the duchy. The girl explained that she could not trust His Highness the Crown Prince, so she turned to the emperor. Because there must always be a contingency plan. And then Kael grabbed her head, which worried his wife, who immediately asked how the Marquis was feeling. The man explained that he was simply tired and wanted to sleep, so the heroine suggested that he take a nap while they were driving. And when they arrived at the location, she would immediately wake him up. At that moment, when at that meeting the girl began to talk about the duchy. Everyone was very surprised, because it was unexpected for everyone. But Diana was most surprised, who stated that it was very arrogant of him to demand such a thing. However, the Marchioness did not want to back down, so she explained that, recalling the tyranny of the Orcus family. It was necessary to conclude that it was better to elevate the person most loyal to the emperor, so that what happened to the past dukes would not happen again. They would not happen again. A girl does not need wealth. The main thing is that her beloved is alive, healthy, and happy. Helios at that moment began to try to force the Marchioness not to say anything more about this matter. Because, in his opinion, now is not the right time for it. Judging by the tone, His Majesty was truly discouraged by Estia's proposal. Although the prince himself promised the former Duchy of Orcus to the Marquises. But the girl did not trust him. But above all, the heroine was worried about how the emperor would react to her proposal. Then, His Majesty noticed how the Marquis gained an ideal assistant in his wife. And then the emperor admitted that, in fact, after his last meeting with Seal, he learned in detail about the Marchioness through his son and wife. His Majesty perfectly understood Estia's thinking and proposed to seriously discuss this idea with the Crown Prince. The emperor pronounced a verdict that everything would be 100 times better with Estia as an assistant. The girl was happy, because Helios can now secretly be angry as much as he wants. Because his father praises the Marchioness and does not plan to stop. After this, neither Helios nor Diana said anything more, and the Marquis and his wife talked a little more with the emperor. And while Estia mentally reviewed the entire meeting with the emperor, she didn't even notice that Kael had fallen asleep. The story does not seem convincing enough, not even for a novel. But there is nothing left but to hope they believe it. The heroine thought that it was so cute that she regretted that there were no smartphones in this world to take a picture of that moment. After this, Estia remembered how her beloved nobly defended her in front of Helios. Meanwhile, the emperor was already in his bed, and his son was sitting next to him, taking care of his father. Then His Majesty admitted to the Crown Prince that it was not easy for him to attend this meeting. The emperor knows that Kael is very perceptive, so he understands that the Marquis only pretended not to notice anything. The prince told his father that Diana would come to heal him soon, but His Majesty asked his son to tell his wife not to move in the future. And then, His Majesty added that he and his son needed to talk about Diana's strength. Because she treated her husband's father every day, and because of this, the emperor noticed changes in the heroine's gift. Then Helios turned to his beloved, who told him that she was already going to treat the emperor. And then he asked how she felt, and then started a dialogue about how he didn't expect the Marchioness to raise the issue of the duchy. And while His Majesty was talking, her husband simply remained silent, as if ordering his thoughts to say something important. Fortunately, the girls did not chase her away, and they were even allowed to discuss all this with the Marquis later. When he felt better, before reaching Diana, Helios talked about her with his father, who noticed that his son's wife had been very anxious lately. The emperor also noticed that something was happening with the girl's sacred power. So he advised his son to spend more time with his beloved. After talking with his father, Helios also turned pale, so the saint asked if he also needed to be treated after his visit to the emperor. Meanwhile, the crown prince thought that his wife couldn't even heal the emperor. But he offered to use his power on Helios. And while his majesty was worried that his wife was hiding changes in her strength from him, the girl herself decided that he was also worried about the Marchioness. The crown prince realizes that he is fed up with this whole situation because he and Diana got married recently, and this should have been the best time of their lives. But instead they do nothing but discuss problems. Therefore, Helios could not stand it. He grabbed his wife and shouted for her to stop, but the girl didn't understand at all what he was talking about. And then His Majesty said that he already knew everything, which greatly frightened his beloved. After this, the crown prince began to insist that Diana stop hiding her secret from him and tell him everything honestly. Meanwhile, Estia and her beloved had already arrived home, and upon getting out of the carriage, the Marquis admitted that he was not sure if it was worth going so far to demand the duchy. By the end of the dialogue, night was approaching, so the heroine was allowed to spend the night at the Marquis's house, in a separate room. Then the girl asked Kael if he still didn't believe her, since he doubted her proposal. But the reason turned out not to be trust, but the fact that not even the emperor can grant such a high position without any reason. The butler had already invited the couple to eat. However, the Marchioness asked her beloved to accompany her for a walk. Only this walk is necessary, so that Estia can tell the Marquis one of her important predictions. Meanwhile, the main couple was still fighting, because Diana claimed she didn't understand what her husband was trying to tell her. Helios understands that his father is right in that even if Diana turns the whole world against him, then her husband should be on the heroine's side. And then, the man asks his wife to be honest with him, asking her directly if her divine holy power has disappeared. The crown prince explained to the girl that his father already knew everything, because no matter how much Diana tried to help, no improvement was seen, so he supposed that the ability had disappeared. But His Majesty decided that Helios simply trusted Estia. It was thanks to the Marchioness's prophecy that the man learned about the loss of power for the first time. And here Diana was right. And upon learning this, the saint began to tell her beloved that all this was a trap, because Estia promised to keep this secret. After such a difficult and eventful day, Estia will finally be able to rest so that tomorrow she can try again to save her beloved with renewed vigor. According to His Majesty, it was the Marchioness who advised the heroine to hide this secret from the crown prince for as long as possible. And Diana simply followed her advice. Helios was surprised by the fact that Estia forced his wife to hide the prophecy from everyone. But the Marchioness told the crown prince that Diana ordered her to keep silent, keeping this information secret, with which His Majesty did not agree. The words of the two girls differ from each other, which means that one of them is lying. It only remains to choose who to trust in this situation. Diana, meanwhile, kept claiming that the Marchioness was to blame for all this. But the crown prince still didn't understand why his beloved followed the advice of the woman he hated so much. And then the princess replied that she simply didn't know. And then she added that her holy power had not disappeared, but had simply weakened for a while. And then it would return. It turned out that Diana is not going to believe the prophecy, because she believes that her abilities have not disappeared. Helios said nothing, thought about everything, and then His Majesty began to ask her if she really didn't believe her wife. But the Marchioness, the saint's words were illogical, because at first she said she didn't believe Estia's words. And then she did what the Marchioness ordered her, hiding the whole truth from His Majesty. In one day the girl achieved a lot, and now she only has to continue in the same spirit to achieve what she wants. There was too much evidence that the girl's prophecy was not a lie. Helios told his wife this. But still, the crown prince remains on his beloved side. He still wants to protect her to the end. Because he loves her. Therefore, from now on, the protagonist must believe her husband and hide nothing from him. Because he will always be on her side. Diana, meanwhile, thought that even if the prince pronounces speeches as sweet as he loves her, she must believe him completely. Upon returning home, Estia realized how tired she was, so she began to recall what she had been doing all day. Thus the Marchioness recalled a walk with her beloved, during which she predicted that a second provocation from another state was coming. And although the war on the border had already been stopped, the second provocation would be much more serious. So Kael asked if the girl had informed the crown prince of this information. Then the heroine reminded her husband of the first attack, which was avoided thanks to Estia. After which she was able to gain Helios's trust. When an armed conflict broke out with a neighboring country before Kaelus's resurrection, the entire empire mourned the premature departure of Kaelus, who soon managed to return and stop the war. This means that if Kael resolves everything through diplomacy this time, there will be a reason to grant him the ducal title. As was the case last time. But Estia was not the only one puzzled about what to do next. Because at that moment, Kael also couldn't sleep. Before Estia's rebirth, negotiations to end the war were on the verge of humiliation. So if Kael could resolve everything through diplomacy this time, there would be a reason to give him the ducal title. And then the Marquis asked what would happen if he failed in diplomacy, but Estia didn't even think about it. Because she trusted her beloved. Then the girl said that if Kael doesn't want to participate in all this, then she is ready to do everything for him. The heroine was so determined that she didn't allow her husband to say a word. So he tried to calm her by covering her mouth with his hand. As a result, due to the high level of embarrassment, the Marquis rushed off with the words that Quiros was waiting for him, leaving Estia alone. After this, the Marchioness thought about how happy she was, and then the thought came to her about how Diana and Helios were doing. And Helios? Meanwhile, His Majesty was crying because her husband no longer believed her, although she promised that she would always be by his side. Diana is very worried about this, because the only person the girl can trust did this to her. And the heroine has already begun to think that Helios has practically abandoned her. And then the idea occurred to His Majesty that she had to choose Kael, because with Helios everything would end very quickly. Diana remembered with what tenderness and reverence the Marquis treated her, who always believed the main character. The Marquis is confused and doesn't know what to do and how to continue living, because in a short time he has lost people dear to him. And now he has also agreed to marry a stranger. Therefore, His Majesty decided that she needed to take Kaelus away from Estia to do her own thing. And while Estia was mocking Diana's blind faith, the saint herself was confident in her ability to bring Kael back. Because God would take care of everything. In the original novel, the main characters had a truly strong love, which the Marchioness remembered while in the library of the Imperial Palace, where all the books of the Empire are collected. And the girl ended up there because her beloved wanted to go there before returning to governmental duties. But he went not only to the library, but to the secret archive inside it, where confidential information is stored. The Marchioness was not granted permission to enter the repository, so she waited alone for her husband in the common library. The girl did not expect to find the book that the main character read in the original in the library. So Estia took this novel in her hands to study it in more detail. Helios constantly mocked Diana because among the large number of books, the heroine only chose love stories. And while she was thinking about this, the prince approached her and asked if this was the only book that interested the Marchioness. The girl didn't understand why His Majesty came to this place, because he had to work at that moment. Then the crown prince explained that he came to the library to look for information. But it so happened that he ran into the Marchioness because he wanted to talk to her. Estia decided that all this was due to her request to receive the title of Duke. So she began to apologize to His Majesty if he suddenly felt offended by her wish. The second main character, Kaelus, who is unrequitedly in love with Diana, is also present at this ball. In a fit of desperation, the hero mentally addresses his beloved Diana and asks her for advice. But the crown prince explained that he had already forgotten about that. But since the girl wanted to discuss it, he began to change the subject to the duchy, although initially he wanted to talk about something else. It turned out that the prince wanted to see the Marchioness to advise her to hide her predictions from Diana, which puzzled Estia. It was clear how uncomfortable the relationship between the crown prince and his wife was now. But the Marchioness pretended not to understand what His Majesty was talking about, clarifying what was wrong with her predictions. Then the crown prince explained everything by saying that his beloved simply didn't believe the girl's predictions. And she, in turn, asked why His Majesty listened to the Marchioness's advice. Why is this stupid conversation necessary if His Majesty already understood which of the two girls is lying? This way he won't hear anything new from Estia. Helios replied to the girl that she was saying everything correctly, and that's why it angered him even more than usual. While the heroine thought about what was happening to His Majesty today, he asked her if there was a next prediction. But the heroine decided for now to keep silent about the threat of war that she told Kael about. Because if the Marchioness makes a mistake, the merits of her husband may be diminished. Therefore, the girl told the prince that the only thing she could talk about at the moment was changing fashion trends in clothing. Helios seemed so impatient that the heroine began to assure him that the predictions were just her vision of the situation. So if the crown prince relied only on them, he might miss something important. The reckless act the heroine committed still surprises even herself. And she still doesn't understand how she could have done it. After this, silence fell between the heroes, and Estia interrupted him by asking him to leave first in order to go to her beloved. And as soon as the crown prince found out that Kael was also in the library, he hurried to look for him. However, His Majesty could not go far because the Marchioness tried to stop him by grabbing his hand. And because all this happened very quickly, Estia crashed into Helios, who turned sharply. Coincidentally, it was at that moment that Kael returned from the secret archive and found his wife practically in the arms of the crown prince. The heroine immediately feared that her beloved might misinterpret what he saw. So she immediately began to make excuses. After hearing all his wife's explanations and justifications, the Marquis calmly replied that he understood everything. And then, with the same dryness, he told Estia that they should go home for now, as if nothing had happened. And since Kael understood everything correctly, and the heroine doesn't need to worry about this, then he can calmly continue with his affairs. At that moment, all the girls' thoughts were occupied thinking about what was happening with Helios and Diana. As a result, the heroine came to the conclusion that His Majesty no longer trusted his wife, since he decided to seek information from the Marchioness. Only now, the girl realizes what she has signed up for, because marriage is quite an important period in everyone's life. And she enters it without really thinking about anything. Estia expected the love of the main characters to be completely destroyed. But so far it's not, because only trust in their relationship has been lost. And although Elio still loves his wife, he can no longer trust her, which has already become a success for Estia's plan. The Marchioness was glad that Kael had not misunderstood her that very day. But a part of the girl still feels sad, because this means that she evokes no feeling in her beloved. But Estia understands that she and the Marquis are only contract spouses, so you shouldn't expect any feeling from the man. Kael himself, meanwhile, thought that when he saw his wife with the prince in the library, he remembered a moment from the past. For a couple of seconds, the Marquis almost thought that what happened with Diana was repeating itself with Estia. But then the man saw the expression of disgust on his wife's face and realized that he had simply almost misunderstood everything. Estia didn't even have to make excuses at that moment, because all the girl's feelings were visible with just one look at her beloved. That night, both the Marchioness and her beloved thought about whether they were still only contracted spouses for each other, or if this was turning into something more. And the next day, Estia learned some news that surprised her so much that she even dropped her cup. Because it turned out that the Crown Prince and His Majesty had invited the girl to a tea party. But what is said cannot be taken back, so Estia can only accept it, and the fact that it is simply in a novel calms her completely. The girl is still trying to convince herself that she didn't strive to become Kael's wife, even if her feelings tell her otherwise. The heroine's desires take a back seat, because the most important thing she wants to achieve now is to save her loved one's life, and not to marry successfully. In the end, the girl decides on the fact that she is willing to do everything possible to achieve her goal and help Kael. Estia decided that in the novel, her most important task is precisely to convince the Marquis to commit suicide. A mysterious voice suddenly tells the heroine that they will always be with her, no matter what happens. The dream ends with thoughts about who the voices promising to help her are, because it always seemed to her that she was alone in this world. Everyone Estia dreamed of meeting gathered at the ball, and she spent a lot of money on it. Having woken up completely, Estia continues to think about the strange dream she had. And maybe it means that something important. Then the butler appears in her room to greet the girl and ask her how she slept in her new place. In the Marquis's house, the beds are so soft that the girl sleeps well. And the butler is happy about it. Euros, as an attentive person, notices Estia's excitement and gently hints that she cannot hide her condition. After the usual dialogue, the girl dares to ask about the state of her beloved, for whom she is very worried, although the butler replies to this, saying that the Marquis is better today. He is surprised because the heroine should see the future, but she doesn't know it. The girl once again has to make up an excuse on the fly, and this time she reports that she only sees big events. To which the butler only says that he was joking, which puts Estia in an uncomfortable position. It is already difficult enough to trust a girl you have only known for a day. But she saved the Marquis, and this fact cannot be denied. And then the butler takes the heroine by surprise, telling her that by order of the Marquis, he was preparing documents. And Estia immediately understands what he is talking about, but first of all she is worried that Euros worked all night, while she was sleeping soundly. Our heroine is simply an unimportant extra character, so she can only watch from afar those she admires. But this is enough for her. The encounter with the Marquis is very close, but it is worth understanding that at this moment he is in a vulnerable position. And every word must be chosen prudently. And then the girl surprises Euros again, asking him to bring her something that Kael loves very much. And only the Marquis himself and his butler know this. After all the conversations, Estia still goes to her beloved, although she is very worried about their meeting. She understands that the dialogue will be difficult and is already preparing in advance for a difficult conversation. And then Estia sees Kael, who seemed to be waiting for her, looking towards the door without taking his eyes off. It seemed that after this heavy look, the last hope for at least some kind of trust, as if nothing had happened, had disappeared. All memories associated with Kael's previous death suddenly began to surface before the girl's eyes. But Estia managed to recover, because now she can fix everything if she tries. However, the girl's confidence and willpower do not help her start a dialogue. And an awkward pause occurs between the characters. The girl understands that she cannot even move, because in front of her is the one she has loved from afar for a long time. Diana was everyone's favorite, noble, beautiful, kind, and showed love to everyone. Having made a decision, Estia sits next to Kael, and they begin to read the documents that the butler prepared for them. According to these documents, it turns out that after signing, Estia will have all the powers that Kaelis has. And she will also receive the status of Marchioness. The girl was surprised by how well drafted the document was, hastily prepared, which demonstrates the butler's competence. To demonstrate her honesty, Estia rejects the contract clause that includes the girl's rights to the property and the Marquis's money, and as a result, this part is excluded. While the girl and the butler discuss the details, the Marquis, without even reading anything, signs the document without unnecessary hesitation. Estia and Euros are very surprised by this turn of events, because they didn't even have time to edit the document. But Kaelis, with his whole appearance, shows that he doesn't care about formalities, and he only wants rest and silence. This action once again demonstrates how depressed the Marquis is at this moment. And that life means nothing to him anymore. Every action and every look from Kaelis makes the heroine worry even more about him. The girl somehow tries to cheer up her love and promises him that he definitely will not regret his decision. Of course, the two best friends we met above immediately fall in love with such an ideal girl. Even despite her excitement, she manages to show him her beautiful and radiant smile to somehow lift Kaelis's spirits. But instead of a responsive smile, the girl only receives words that she should leave. And finally leave him alone. With this note, the meeting of the girl and the butler with the Marquis ends. And they leave his room bewildered, thinking about everything that just happened. After Kael's behavior, the souls of both who left are now heavy. And the girl starts thinking about the fact that she needs to get to the temple. The butler does not understand the girl's zeal at all, and asks why exactly they needed her at the temple. Estia explains her urge to go to the temple by saying that she needs to return something to the Marquis, which confuses the butler. According to the girl, first of all, she intends to return Diana because she is very dear to the Marquis. Diana is not an ordinary girl, but a saint who has divine power. But it turns out that Diana was not always considered a saint, because she was from the common people, and therefore, her position in the temple was not strong. And only thanks to Kael and his donation to the temple, in the form of the most fertile land, they helped Diana become a saint and achieve the position that gave her a long life. And Happy suddenly stumbles and falls with her whole body to the ground. There are also villains in this story, and to be precise, they are Duke Orcus and his daughter, Duchess Ritona. If it weren't for Kael, Diana would have nothing. But at the same time, she moved away from him during a difficult period of her life that broke her heart. Estia understands how unfairly Diana treated someone who always took care of her and helped her in everything. And while the heroine was in her thoughts, she was already taken to the temple, where she so wanted to go to help her beloved Marquis. The girl is going to talk to Diana and open her eyes to everything Kael did for her, while she took it all for granted and didn't realize it. And then all the heroine's thoughts get confused before an unknown young man who, breathlessly, turns to her and asks about the Marquis's carriage in which she arrived. But not seeing the Marquis in the carriage, the mysterious hero is surprised and asks where Lord Kael himself is. Estia is asked why the Marquis arrived without warning, to which the girl replies that at this moment she will take his place, which surprises the already surprised boy even more. But the shocking facts don't end there, because Estia introduces herself as Kaelis's wife, which the stranger clearly did not expect. Now it was the girl's turn to be surprised, as the boy's reaction to the received information was simply laughter. It turns out that he simply didn't believe Estia, because everyone in the novel is sure that Kaelis will only ever love Diana, and no one will be able to overshadow her. Duchess Ritona is not so simple, because she knows the power she has and uses it, wanting to marry Helios and become empress. But the girl did not listen to the stranger's arguments about her words, but simply headed towards where she needed to go at that moment. According to her plans, the heroine made it clear that she did not want to continue the dialogue with that guy, whoever he was. And so that the stranger does not argue again, the girl simply throws a whole bag of coins at him. Estia knows perfectly well how to appease an insolent person like this unknown young man was. Realizing that her method is working, the heroine says that she wants to meet the high priest. And the boy no longer dares to argue with her, but immediately replies that he is ready to take her wherever she wants. And now the girl was taken to another stranger, who was ready to listen to her. But it turns out that this is not the high priest as she demanded, and the girl needs him. It turns out that it is not so easy to get to the high priest, but the young man who is willing to listen to her also has a high rank. As it should be noted, everyone in the temple was very interested in Estia's words that she is the Marquis's wife. And now they are trying to get more information about this from her. The girl, realizing that they are trying to test her, begins a polite conversation, saying that no one knows about the Marquis's marriage because they have only been married for one day. Diana turned out to be an obstacle for the Duchess, so Ritona tries to hurt and humiliate the poor girl, but the main characters immediately come to her defense. In confirmation, Estia provides the marriage document and says that they can send a person to confirm the information with the Marquis himself. But even after all the evidence, they still didn't believe the girl, because everyone was sure that Kaelis would never stop loving Diana. Although the temple servant did not believe the heroine, he decided to ask her for what purpose she was visiting them. And then it turns out that the reason for visiting the temple was that Hestia decided to return the land that Kaelis sacrificed for Diana. This land is very valuable to the temple, so this desire offended the servant so much that he jumped from his seat. Losing all composure, they began to try to intimidate Hestia with God's anger, but this did not scare her at all, because she understands that all the fuss is due to the value of the land. And this land was not given to God, but to Saint Diana, so talking about God's punishment did not sound convincing at all. And the saint to whom the land was given is no longer in the temple, so the girl decided to return the land to the Marquis. Although without his knowledge, Estia knows everything about the temple's greed and understands that Saint Diana's land was simply brazenly appropriated by those to whom it does not belong. This is where the temple servant finally gives up and agrees that resolving such issues is not within his competence, and decides to call someone of a higher rank. With the help of blackmail, Duchess Ritona forces Helios to accept a compromise with her. And the prince has no choice but to accept it. The heroine was not sure that all this would work, but upon seeing the temple servant's reaction, she realized that she had said everything correctly. While the girl was waiting, she thought about how she wanted to show the whole world that Diana is not as ideal as many people see her. Lost in her thoughts, Estia didn't even notice that the one she had been eagerly waiting for had stealthily approached behind her. It was the high priest who finally appeared before the girl, and he already knew the reason why she came to the temple. While the heroine waited, all the documents were checked and their authenticity was confirmed. So now they began to treat the heroine with much more care. The high priest did not stay long at the ceremony and immediately asked Estia directly about the land she so wished to return to. The girl reiterated her wish once again, reminding the high priest that this land originally belonged to the Marquis, and hoping that they had contacted her, and now it was possible to reach an agreement. However, the high priest let her know that he had no intention of returning the land to her, and she made all this way in vain. The high priest's answer was a surprise for the heroine, because Gestia didn't even think that there was a possibility that she would hear a refusal to return the land. It turned out that the Marquis knew that the land of Ilion would not completely belong to Diana, as Estia believed. As a result, Kael intervened in this marriage and committed a cruel act, helping his best friend. But the girl decided that even with this turn of events, she had to stand firm until the end, because she had come too far to stop. The heroine is full of determination and once again shows her strong character, deciding to remind herself and others that she now holds the title of Marchioness. Estia turned out not to be as simple as the high priest expected, because she knows much more than they could imagine. And the heroine skillfully uses her knowledge, because if all the temple's secrets end up on the pages of the newspaper, then all their legend, built on lies and greed, will be destroyed. The high priest understands the precarious situation he is in now, and the temple itself, so he cannot even utter a word in response to the girl. The last chance to justify himself for the high priest was an attempt to pretend that he did not understand at all what Estia was talking about. But from his behavior, it was clear that he was already on the edge. The girl notices panic in the high priest's eyes and understands that he will never get away with it, no matter how much he tries to make up, because his great secret has been revealed. Finding herself in an advantageous position, Estia can finally laugh directly at the high priest. The girl also decided to discuss Diana's duplicity, who is a saint and used the Marquis's love for her own ends. And if we take into account the fact that Diana is a fool, but at the same time she became the crown prince's wife, then everything will get worse, because the aristocracy will not be happy with this turn of events. And because of these words, the high priest became even more tense. Diana, upon learning what Kael had done, began to argue with him and shout at him. And in a fit of anger, she orders him never to appear before her again, which hurts Kael. Although Diana is supported by the common people, the aristocracy doesn't like those who weren't one of them. But at the same time, they began to have the kind of power that the saint has. If the whole world finds out about the terrible secrets of the temple and the saint, they will have problems they can hardly cope with. The high priest's panic increases with every word the girl says, because he increasingly understands that a real threat comes from her, and that he cannot argue with her. For Estia, it doesn't matter how cruel her accusations are, because she is willing to do anything for the sake of her beloved. So she calmly continues to threaten the high priest. The girl is even ready to go to the emperor with this news, because she is ready to achieve her goal in every possible way. The high priest is still trying to save his reputation and the reputation of the temple by starting to say that the girl has no proof. But in response to the priest's attempts to escape, the girl just smiles, completely sure of her victory in this dispute. As a result, the temple servants leave and ask Estia to wait a couple of minutes to discuss her current situation. The temple and those in charge are not free from sin, so the emperor's inspection, and what is revealed during it, can greatly damage everyone who serves in this temple. So the girl is sure that the high priest will not be able to do anything to stop her, because she is in a more advantageous position than him. After that fight, Diana turned her back on Kael forever. And the evidence Estia talked about actually doesn't exist. She was simply able to intimidate everyone so much that they didn't even try to check it, but immediately trusted her. The heroine understands the precarious situation the temple is in now. So she calmly starts saying what she wants and even mocks the employees a little. Estia, in her opinion, acted generously because she did not immediately go to the emperor, but decided to fix everything quietly and peacefully without enlightening the whole world about it. The high priest accepted that he could no longer do anything against the Marchioness and could only accept this and accept her terms. No one knows if the high priest will do anything else to avoid ceding such valuable land for the temple. The Marchioness returns only at night and is immediately greeted by the butler, who cries out her name in alarm. Before the girl had time to enter the house, Euros immediately attacked her with various questions, not knowing what she was doing at the temple for so long. And then a document appears before the butler's eyes, establishing the property guarantee of the land of Ilion, so valuable to the temple. Euros was incredibly happy about this, because this land was one of the most expensive, and now it finally belonged to the Marquis again. The butler and Estia jump happily, knowing how difficult it was to return the land of Ilion. But Estia was able to cope with it, which made both her and Euros happy. The wedding day arrived, and the loving hearts of Helios and Diana were finally united. Kael himself watched this celebration from afar, while standing alone by the window. It seemed that Kaelis avoided the girl and did not want to draw her attention at all, moving unnoticed and silently. But even though he tried to hide, the girl still felt his gaze, which was directed in her direction. To somehow dispel the discomfort between Estia and Kaelis, the butler invites the girl to tell the hero such wonderful news herself. And it is logical that the Marchioness herself tells him everything, because it was thanks to her that the land returned. But the girl is afraid to go to meet him. As a result, the girl decides that the butler should tell the Marquis everything himself, because he is not yet ready to see the heroine. While Euros goes to give the news to Kaelis, the girl will go to rest, because this day was quite difficult and eventful for her. The Marchioness is very pleased with herself, because she has begun to set in motion her plan to save her beloved. Before going to bed, the girl is already planning what she will do next. That is, the first thing she will do is go to check the lands she managed to return. Although Kael himself needs to inspect the land, the heroine wants him to rest, so she will go herself. Estia has been watching this story for a year now, which is approaching its happy ending. Absorbed in her thoughts, Estia quickly falls asleep, exhausted by the day. And while the girl sleeps sweetly, absorbed in her victory in obtaining land, others are increasingly worried about the news about the Marquis's unexpected wife. One hero, even after seeing all the documents, could not believe what he learned. Because he hadn't seen it with his own eyes yet. The information spreads quickly, so there is no way to stop its flow. Kaelis was quite surprised how quickly the girl managed to recover the land that the temple cherished. All the courage and perseverance of a girl disappears every time she meets her beloved. And here she again sits awkwardly and doesn't know what to say in response. And so their dialogue continues, with awkwardness and embarrassment, while the girl tries to apologize for having done everything in secret with the young man. Although he planned to go inspect the newly acquired land, all plans were ruined as soon as the butler approached her with the words that the Marquis was calling her. The girl is very surprised that Kael is calling her, because before he always tried to avoid her. The heroine began to think that, since Kaelis wants to see her, he is definitely angry with her because she returned the land without his knowledge. The heroine thinks that if the story is already over, she will soon be able to return home. It turns out that the Marquis only just found out that his wife's name is Estia, and he decided to clarify it with her. An awkward pause arose between the characters again, which often occurs in their dialogues, because they don't fully know each other to communicate calmly. Their gazes meet, and Kael no longer tries to hide the fact that he is looking directly at the girl. And here Estia starts talking too indiscriminately again, because she is still very nervous in front of her beloved. The heroine notices every insignificant detail, even the fact that Kaelis is reading the newspaper she bought him. Taking a break from the newspaper, the Marquis turns to Estia, to which she responds instantly. And then Kaelis asks a question that the girl did not expect, because he asked her why she wanted to marry him. Because they don't even know each other. And here Estia faces a choice and must decide whether to tell Kael the truth, or invent some kind of excuse again. The Marquis calmly and patiently awaits the heroine's response while she thinks about what to tell him. And without thinking twice, the girl informs the hero that the reason is her hatred towards the main characters of the novel, the Crown Prince and his wife Diana. The heroine raises her head, and we notice tears running down her cheeks because she realizes that Kael was murdered. Helios and Diana are very happy with each other. Estia understands that stupid excuses won't work with her beloved because he is very intelligent and insightful. And then the girl honestly said that she wanted to help Kaelis so that he would stop thinking about death. Helios and Diana greatly offended Estia's beloved, and that is why she wants to force them to apologize to him. The girl wants the main characters to regret crossing Kaelis's path. The Marquis is so stunned by such a confession that he now simply remains silent and reflects on everything he has heard. Confessions like this will stun anyone and make them think for a long time. And then it turns out that the butler had already told the Marquis about Estia's gift to see the future. And all this was just a test. Kaelis, of course, was very surprised by these words from his butler. And of course, this is hard to believe, so Kael at first thought it was time for Euros to retire. But the butler also believed this for a reason. He has proof that she knows something that others are unaware of. Although Hestia is happy for the main characters and their happiness, she is also worried about Kaelis. The girl even rejected the Marquis's property, which shows that she definitely doesn't need the Marquis's money. You can see from Hestia's behavior and actions that she truly cares about Kaelis. The Marquis finally met someone who doesn't need wealth or status from him, but only to help him cope with his pain. Kael doesn't understand why a girl they've never met is doing so much for him. Estia doesn't even know how to explain her desire to help Kaelis, because he has no idea that he is her love. And the heroine realizes that the truth sounds too strange and unrealistic. So she urgently needs to find a clear explanation. And Kael keeps pressing, insisting that she tell the truth about her reasons for helping him. The heroine is still trying to organize her thoughts to start explaining everything. The girl decided to start her excuses by asking if the Marquis likes what she is doing. If the Marquis doesn't like something about her, then Estia is ready to sign a divorce agreement right then and there and leave his house. The heroine wishes Kaelis all the best and hopes he can move on with his life. even though her heart is broken. The girl realized that whatever the answer, for Kael she is still just a third wheel. And if something doesn't suit him, then she can leave. The girl's response greatly surprised Kael, and he didn't even immediately know what to answer. Kaelis decided not to comment on the girl's words, but simply changed the subject, saying that Helios had sent a letter. But since Estia started everything, then she also needs to deal with this matter. And Kael gave the girl full right to do whatever she wants, and he will not interfere with it. The girl understands that now no one will definitely stop her, and she can finally take revenge on Kael. Having received permission from Kael himself, the girl immediately intends to go to a meeting with the crown prince. And so that Helios would believe Estia, the Marquis wrote her a confirmation letter. Just as the girl was unexpectedly called, she was also unexpectedly thrown out the door. And at the very moment Estia left Kael, the butler came running to her. We learned that Kaelis did not attend the wedding of Helios and Diana, and Estia regrets not being able to see him one last time. Although Euros didn't hear what the heroes were talking about, he immediately starts apologizing on behalf of his master, because he knows him very well. But it turns out that the butler apologized in vain because nothing happened, and then he finds out that the heroine will go somewhere again. The girl says she will go to a meeting with the crown prince, which is also part of her plan. Euros, as a competent worker, is ready to help the heroine in everything and support her immediately, assuming that they would now prepare for this important meeting. But he won't be the only one helping, and to ask others for help, he immediately shouted out loud about the Marchionesses meeting with the crown prince. Many surprised girls, who worked for the Marquis, immediately rushed to the shout. Everyone rushed so fast, enthusiastically rejoicing that Gestia was even a little scared by such pressure. The girls did their best, because in the end the Marchioness's suit turned out so irresistible that the heroine herself was surprised. Estia was waiting for an important meeting, so she had to look perfect to show her status with just one look. However, the heroine was surprised not only by her appearance, but also by how much everyone cares about her. Despite the fact that recently and suddenly, she became the Marquis's wife. The novel has ended. It's time for the heroine to go home. And the reason for so much attention was that Hestia always tries to help Kael and even returned his valuable land to him. So now all the Marquis's servants began to treat her with respect. The heroine was very seduced by the fact that she was trusted and loved even more than Saint Diana, the darling of the entire novel. And Hestia, full of determination, goes to meet the most beautiful people in the novel. That is, its main characters. But then she realizes that she was too confident in herself, because she is far from Diana's beauty. Seeing how beautiful the main characters were, Estia began to worry. But she understood that it was foolish to be afraid just because of appearance, and tried to gather strength. The main characters met the girl, not to say especially kind and welcoming. And immediately, Estia starts asking questions, asking if the main characters had met the girl before. And then the heroine begins to recall how she first saw Diana, when she first appeared in the novel. Before, Diana looked simple, in simple clothes, not as elegant as she is now. Diana is considered a saint because she can cure any illness with just her smile. Although the heroine mentally said goodbye to her beloved Kaelis, a year later fate brought them together again. Diana legitimately holds the title of saint because she is kind and helps absolutely everyone who comes to her. The modesty, kindness, and beauty of the saint make everyone fall in love with her, without exception. But unfortunately, over time, Diana has changed and now no longer has everything that Estia saw in their first meeting. When asked if they had met before, the heroine replied that she was clearly confusing her with someone. But in reality, all this yoke made Estia very happy, because the couple doesn't even know what she is doing and who she really is. The main characters led the guest to a beautiful room that looked very rich, which was understandable because she came to the crown prince himself. The girl did not wait long and immediately handed the main characters a marriage document and a personal letter from the Marquis to prove she wasn't a deceiver. The couple immediately recognized Kael's handwriting, so they can be absolutely sure that Estia is not a liar. Diana reread all the documents provided by him and seemed not to believe what she saw. No one expected Kael to get married, because he was always in love only with Diana. And he didn't look at anyone else, even when the saint didn't choose him. Kaelis looks at the heroine sadly. Moreover, Kaelis is not the type of person to make important decisions without thinking, because he is a very sensible young man. But all the evidence suggests that he is not lying, so it only remains to accept that it is true. Kael got married, and this is a pure and irrefutable fact, because the contract, the letter, and the Marquis's carriage in which the girl arrived prove everything. Estia is still happy that the Crown Prince and Diana finally believed her. The moment they understood all the evidence, extreme surprise appeared on their faces, which greatly amused Estia. The Crown Prince began his dialogue by telling the girl that even if she was the Marchioness, proving with these words that he still didn't fully believe her, and says that Estia abused her power by taking the temple's land and threatening them. To this, the girl replies that there were no threats, and she doesn't understand what they are talking about. But Helios continues to maintain that it was definitely threats. But the girl was well prepared for this dialogue, so she immediately replies that the misuse of office did not come from her, but, on the contrary, from the temple, because they simply took for themselves the land donated to Diana. Estia meets her beloved, but it's as if they are separated by a wall preventing them from getting closer. Prison. Diana now enters the dialogue, saying that the temple has no personal property. So there was no appropriation of land, because everything dedicated to the temple belongs to the gods. Estia then had a question for Diana personally: why, in this case, the saint uses her powers only for the good of the imperial family. The saint stopped helping the common people, hiding behind the walls of the imperial castle. In wealth, Diana abandoned the commoners, although she was one of them before, but the authorities distanced her from her roots. Now the saint doesn't save everyone in a row, as she did at the very beginning of the novel. And in fact, she uses the powers given to her by the gods in the way they would like, because she distanced herself from the people who need help. Faced with this, Diana cannot even think of what to say in her own defense, because she understands that Estia is right. And then her husband comes to the saint's rescue and tells the heroine to watch her tongue. Estia decided to change tactics and start pressing for compassion, but at the same time, she noticed that she wasn't asking the prince anything. But he still answered for his wife, without allowing her to say a word. The Marchioness's next question was whether the crown prince wanted Kael to donate his lands to a temple in honor of the saint. At the end of the novel, the main characters got married and are happy. The girl says that the Marquis was in love with Diana, and that was the only reason he donated his lands. Estia makes it clear that Kaelis's feelings for Diana are in the past, calling it old love. Consequently, the marriage has nothing to answer to the Marchioness's words, because everything she said is the pure truth, and they know it. The heroine's plan is to explain all the old actions of her beloved so that he can quickly move on without thinking about the past. And although Estia says she is not offended by the crown prince and his wife, in her thoughts she challenges herself, wanting revenge on her beloved. After all this dialogue, Helios seems very depressed, and it's clear he is not happy about the girl's visit. The crown prince doesn't understand how the heroine could marry Kaelis, even the day after his wedding to Diana. Then, Hestia begins to explain to them that all people are different, and not everyone gets married just for the burning love that the crown prince and the saint had. But Helios still doesn't understand why Kaelis chose Estia, when there were always many noble-born girls around him. The heroine doesn't understand how people can be treated so horribly, choosing them like things. The protagonist is ready to return to her normal life, leaving the rich life and carefree life from the novel that she lived for a whole year. And then Estia decided to inform the lovers that she, like Diana, has a superpower. The heroine told them she could see the future. As Estia predicted, the crown prince didn't believe her without proof. But Diana was amazed, because she was always sure that she was the only one so special in the whole world. But it turned out she wasn't. And as proof, Estia decides to predict the future. Hearing this story later, Kael became very interested in what she told them. To which the girl replied that she predicted the capture of a big thief, which worried the entire capital of the empire. Estia shared that the crown prince didn't believe her and called her a fraud. Then Kael asked what Diana said, because mostly Estia was talking about the crown prince. And the heroine started talking about the saint, being very nervous, because she knows Kael's feelings. The entire church listens to the cry of a girl addressing God and asking him to return Kael to her. She is even ready to give her life for it. Soon normal life will return. The girl will meet her family and friends, whom she already misses very much, and everything will return to normal. Marquis Kaelis listened attentively to everything his wife was telling him, and the girl noticed that since Kael asks about Diana, he is still thinking about her. But the young man was glad that the land, which he had already forgotten, belonged to him again. And he thanked Estia for this act, because this way he started to feel at least a little better. The Marquis gets very close to the girl, telling her that he wants to express his gratitude to her. He got too close, and Estia even started to feel embarrassed by this, because Kael usually behaves more distantly. And the girl herself did not expect any gratitude, because seeing her beloved is enough for her. And helping him. Estia's imagination works perfectly, and she was already starting to think about options about what Kael would do to thank her. And everything reached the point where the girl began to worry even more about her ideas. And while the Marchioness flew in the clouds, absorbed in her thoughts, Kael could only wonder what she was thinking about. But Estia's expectations were not met, and she never ended up in her familiar world. As she expected. Consequently, the Marquis ran out of patience and clarified once again what she still wanted to at least somewhat understand what was going through her head. The girl expected no gratitude, so she doesn't even know what to ask. As a result, the girl decided that she wanted to hire a tutor and greatly surprised the Marquis with her choice. And she asked Kael if he had anyone in mind, supposedly hinting at something. The girl said she wanted to bring Madame Harmony from the salon. For some reason, Kaelis clarified if it should really be her, as if he was not satisfied with this choice of tutor. Estia was surprised by Kael's reaction, because just an ordinary tutor caused too many emotions. And all because it turns out that Madame Harmony is the closest aristocrat to Diana, which offended Kael. And here we learn that they only started treating Diana well after Kael slipped deadly poison into two women who were against the saint. But even now, Lady Diana is not loved by everyone in the novel, and there are still many nobles who secretly continue to hate her. The girl still believes that she will return, she just has to wait, and she goes to bed hopefully. Although there are many nobles who are not very friendly with Diana, for some reason Estia chose as a tutor the one who, on the contrary, loves the main character. Madame Harmony is one of the few nobles who treated Diana well from the beginning, always supported the saint in everything, and helped her. It was Madame Harmony who taught Diana court etiquette and always encouraged her not to give up on her love. And she was the saint's spiritual mentor. Estia understands that Madame will not be able to restrain herself and pretend not to know anything about the situation that is happening, and will definitely want to discuss it. And Diana, in order not to find herself in a precarious situation, must gain the support of the nobility as soon as possible. And that is why Estia decided that she would get Harmony before Diana. All this in order to avenge your beloved. Kaelis, however, accepts realizing that he cannot refuse the girl because he wanted to express his gratitude. And the promise cannot be retracted. From the girl's behavior, it was clear that she was planning something, but Kael still didn't understand exactly what. Kaelis feels supported by Estia and is very grateful to her for everything she does for him. Days, weeks, months, a year pass, and she still cannot return home to family and the friends she wanted to see. The heroine is glad that Kael realizes all her efforts because it means she is not doing it in vain. Only gratitude, and the girl is already happy that Kael is showing his feelings for her. It is also nice for Estia that the Marquis addressed her with respect, not informally. The heroine goes to bed with pleasant thoughts because all her efforts were not in vain. The next morning, Hestia asked the butler to contact Madame Harmony, whom the heroine wants to see as her tutor. The future tutor expressed the wish that her lessons would take place at her home, where Hestia could come at a convenient time for her. The girl decides in advance how she should behave in front of the lady to make a good impression on her. Since the heroine has read the novel she is currently in many times, she knows the preferences of every hero and has full confidence in herself regarding this. And thus encouraging herself, Estia went to meet Madame Harmony, but the girl did not expect to have an appointment so soon. So she was already standing at her tutor's door. Estia has already lost all hope. She doesn't know what must be done to return to her real world. The house where the heroine was seemed magical, and she was received by a smiling young man. And quite friendly. The girl was asked the reason for the visit and her name, and then introduced herself as Marchioness Estia. The rest of the people in the house, upon hearing who the heroine was, immediately started whispering and gossiping. Estia felt that everyone's eyes in the room were directed only at her. And that's why she felt uncomfortable, because she was not used to so much attention. The girl supposed that everyone already knew everything about her and what she had done. The only thing on Estia's mind was that she wanted to get away from all these stares as quickly as possible. And then, like a lifeline, Madame Harmony appeared, which made the Marchioness happy. Madame took the girl to a separate room in which there were no other people, for which the heroine was very grateful. Harmony was surprised by the fact that the Marchioness herself came to her, although usually high-ranking people call Madame to their home, and they don't visit her themselves. To which Estia replied that all this was done only to express her serious intentions. The mountain house is all the girl has left, because she gave all her wealth to charity, thinking that she would return home. In Diana, Madame was captivated by her honesty and modesty, so the heroine decided to behave similarly to win Harmony's favor. To give effect, Estia even started to cry so that she could touch her tutor. Madame Harmony immediately rushed to the girl's aid, trying to calm her down and wanting to help. For the heroine, everything was just a game, and so far her plan has worked perfectly, because she managed to convincingly pretend to be someone who needed help. Estia began to talk about Lord Ellie, who was supposedly her stepfather, and then we understand that she came up with some kind of legend for Madame. Although the girl bought her title, she started telling Harmony a completely different story about how she was adopted to be sent to secular society. And so she told her tutor a sad and perfectly crafted story that she passed off as her life. And Estia concluded this tale by saying that she lacks much knowledge, because the title of Marchioness appeared too unexpectedly. And she doesn't know what to do now. Everything the girl said amazed Madame, who was very deeply imbued with the fictitious story. Estia temporarily became someone that Harmony would definitely like, having accumulated the best qualities in herself. And all this so that Madame Harmony agrees to help her and in the future side with her. In a strange world, completely alone, without relatives or acquaintances, our heroine no longer understands if she is alive and what will happen next. But instead of agreeing to help at that very second, as Estia expected, Harmony became thoughtful, as if she wasn't sure about something, and the girl already started wondering what she did wrong. But everything turned out much simpler, because Madame simply did not understand how the Marquis married Estia. All this time, Madame's thoughts were focused solely on how Kael got a wife. And if Harmony asks this, it means she was interested in Estia and her fate. And the heroine strove to achieve this. And then the girl said that she had admired the Marquis for a long time and was always worried about him, dreaming of helping him. Madame was delighted with the heroism with which the Marchioness acted by saving Kael from the pain of a broken heart. And now the girl wants to repay Kael with kindness for agreeing to become his husband. And it became clear how much this heartbreaking story pleased Madame. And the girl even visited the temple for the sake of her beloved, because he is very kind and grateful to Kael. The girl also showed her modesty, saying that she knows her place well and understands that she is not fit to hold a candle to Diana. And this is how the girl managed to win the favor of Madame Harmony. But the girl feels pressured not only by the unknown, but also by understanding that her beloved Marquis Kaelis is still suffering. And from time to time, he tries to commit suicide, but fortunately unsuccessfully. After hearing Estia's story, Madame concluded that she was always willing to help a girl who found herself in a difficult situation. The lady immediately rushed to draw up a plan for Estia's training. And we were convinced that she was a wonderful character. Madame began to teach the girl everything she knew, and it turned out to be quite difficult for Estia. Because there was too much information, but it was all necessary for her plan. A few days later, the maid Clarice brought the news that the thief predicted by the heroine had been caught. And while the maid is happy that a dangerous criminal has been caught, Estia is doing her homework. That never ends. And if the girl's prediction came true, it means that Diana and Helios will have to believe that Estia can predict the future. While everything is going well with the heroine, she decided to ask how the Marquis was feeling. To which the maid became noticeably nervous. It turned out that Kael now had a guest, which surprised the girl, because it seemed that now he was not in a condition to receive anyone. The girl, without thinking twice, asked if the guest's name was Hyperion, which astonished the maid because it turned out to be true. Hyperion is not an ordinary person, because in fact this is the name under which the crown prince hides. And Estia immediately ran to her husband as soon as she heard this information. We learned that Kaelis is tormented by the loss of his best friend and the girl he loved. And it reached the point where he lost the will to live and spent the whole year trying to die. The crown prince came to the Marquis in broad daylight, and no one even warned Estia, which enraged her. At the entrance to the Marquis's room, the heroine meets the butler, who explains his presence at the door by saying that he was simply worried that something might go wrong. Estia tells Euros not to apologize because she understands him perfectly. The butler tells the girl that so far nothing has happened other than a conversation. And then they hear a noise. Rushing into the room, the girl finds a picture where Kael is standing with his hand bleeding from hitting the glass. The girl immediately ran to her beloved asking what was wrong, and at that moment, the butler began to call the doctor. While Estia was trying to help Kael, Helios approached her. But she didn't have time to say anything because the heroine chased him away, blaming him for what happened to the Marquis. The crown prince listened to the girl and left, finally apologizing to Kaelis. It was clear how much pain the Marquis felt, but there was nothing left to do but wait for the doctor. Kael received medical assistance and was now lying in bed, and his wife was sitting next to him. Kaelis is constantly being saved, but he never stops trying to leave this life, and our heroine still hopes that one day she can be happy. The wound turned out to be superficial and appeared because the Marquis, in a fit of emotion, hit the glass, and the girl became curious about what Kaelis was talking to the crown prince about. The Marquis thought that the girl had foreseen his meeting with Helios, to which she replied that she did not see such details. It turns out the hero did not want to host the crown prince and admits that if it were up to him, he would never have met him. Haley, when she arrived at the Marquis, began to ask about his condition, and in response, Kael asked the crown prince if he was enjoying his honeymoon. But the main character of the novel was not going to answer, because he only came to ask questions. The crown prince immediately began trying to talk about the Marquis's wife, who seemed too suspicious to him. According to Kael, there is no point in being careful in life, so it doesn't matter who you marry and how bad they are. And then Helios heard a confession that disheartened him, because the Marquis admitted that he wanted to die on the day of the main character's wedding, and added that it was she who saved him from this. And what does the crown prince care about who the hero chose to marry? Helios was offended because Kael did not share his pain with him, because they are friends and should tell each other everything, while again blaming the Marquis. The crown prince also added that Kael has changed a lot, and it will be painful for Diana to see the hero like this, because she cares about him. The heroine says that she was reborn as a character named Estia. All Estia wanted was for her beloved to find happiness. The mention of Diana was unnecessary, because it further annoyed Kael, due to the fact that the girl did not send a single letter. Now we know exactly what angered the Marquis, because talking about Diana was a bad idea. While Estia and Kaelis were alone, the young man decided to open his heart to the girl, telling her exactly why he wanted to commit suicide. The young man admitted that at first he was upset that he couldn't die, but in the end, thanks to the girl, he was able to realize many things. Meanwhile, Helios told Diana that their mutual friend, Kael, decided to commit suicide on their wedding day. But Estia was able to stop him. And Diana began to worry that there was too much evidence of Estia's superpowers. The crown prince and the saint decided that they were obliged to reveal Silo's wife's true objectives. And then we move on to the girls' tea party, among whom was Estia. We learned that a few days ago the Marchioness received an invitation to a tea party with Countess Erinys. Countess Erinys turned out to be an active person, not inferior in authority to Madame Harmony. Every night the girl fell asleep dreaming that she would return home and finally see the book where Kaelis had the happy ending she so desires for her beloved. The heroine understands that she was invited only out of curiosity about her person, but she is still very nervous. Because if she messes up, she will be in trouble. The heroine's main problem is that she knows practically nothing about Countess Erinys, because in the novel, she was only a secondary character. Even Madame Harmony noticed the girl's excitement and wanted to help her face this situation. Although Estia doesn't know how to behave correctly in front of Erinys, she cannot simply refuse the invitation. But the heroine is willing to do everything possible to help Kael, and these words surprised Harmony. That even in such a difficult situation, she thinks about her husband. An invitation cannot be refused because rumors will then spread, so this option is out. But fortunately, the lady is willing to help her in this situation. Thus the girl arrived at this tea party. Hestia is very worried because she is sitting among strangers and doesn't even know how to behave correctly. And then all the girl's attention turned to the Marchioness, and she was lucky enough to know at least a couple of techniques that Madame taught her. Although the Countess will despise Hestia, Harmony was able to teach her behavior that could help the heroine please all the ladies who will be at the tea party. But every morning, the girl still saw the roof of the mountain house in an empty world, lonely and unknown to her. The heroine must behave with courtesy, modesty, and say what the women want to hear. Flattery helped Hestia please everyone present at the tea party. The girl answered all the questions asked of her, but told everything in such a way that she astonished the ladies. And then they asked Estia how she felt about the fact that Kaelis had been in love with Diana for a long time. And Harmony also spoke about such an indiscreet question and prepared the heroine on how to answer correctly. Everyone expected Estia to react to this question with anger, but she was ready. So she controlled herself. Although this tea party was difficult for the girl, it turned out to be useful because she learned that many women dislike Diana. The girl was also interesting to others because she was in the imperial palace, which added even more respect to her person. Estia had the advantage of a diary in which all the main events of the original were recorded, so that the heroine knows all the important moments that will happen. And now, the girl comes up with a plan about what she will do next, and how this diary can help her with this. And then the heroine remembered a moment that would undoubtedly stun Diana and paralyze her. Estia is suffering. She cannot do anything with her life. She doesn't understand why and why she is in this world where she has no one. From the morning itself, Estia was already rushing to Kael to tell him about her plan, and to ask his permission to do so. But then the girl began to hesitate whether she could just enter Kael's room. And in the end, she simply found Euros so that he could ask everything for her. Still, she reached her beloved and told him that she wanted to visit the crown prince's wife. The Marquis asked if Diana invited her or if she herself decided to visit her, to which she received the answer that the visit was Estia's decision. After the girl told the Marquis the plan, she awaited his reaction. But he simply accepted her and said nothing, although Estia expected any reaction from Kael other than this one. Externally, it seemed that the hero no longer cared about Diana, and he was even surprised that for such simple news the girl had to bother Euros. The Marquis advised Estia that she should no longer bother the servants with such nonsense, but simply enter on any occasion. It turns out this question was raised by the butler, asking if the Marchioness could go to Kael herself, and not ask the servants to report this. The hero was surprised that before the heroine would burst in on him without asking. And now she involves euros in this. And that is why the butler asked his master to personally allow Estia to come whenever she needed him. Kaelis thought that this permission would make the Marchioness happy, but he presented the information with such ignorance that the girl only got angry. When you don't know what to do, you just start wanting to disappear from the world, disappear forever, and suffer no more. And all because she decided that she only caused trouble for others, because she started bothering euros for the sake of her comfort. And then, when Kael had already decided that the girl had asked everything and was ready to leave. But before leaving, Estia asked her husband to lend her his ring with a pink diamond. The girl began to try with all her might to persuade the Marquis to do this, promising to be careful with the ring and just for one day, but her lover replied that she should always wear this ring. And he gifted it to her. Kael gave the ring to the girl, surprising her, because he no longer had a lover. The diamond in this ring was chosen to match Diana's pale pink hair. And for the Marquis, it was a precious wedding gift he wanted to give his beloved. Estia's gratitude cannot be described in words, because this ring was very valuable to her husband. And that's why he gave it to her. Kael noticed that when the heroine left to go to the saint, she had a face as if she wanted to kill someone. The heroine sent a letter requesting an audience with the crown prince's wife, and almost immediately received a reply and went to the meeting. The girl came up with the perfect plan to finish off Helios and also used the ring to reproach Diana. Estia was still very happy thanks to her lover's first gift, and she didn't care that it was originally intended for Diana. And then the girl sees someone she absolutely did not expect to see and freezes in surprise. And surprise in her eyes. And this ring gives the heroine hope that her husband has already abandoned his feelings for Diana. Here the Marchioness's thoughts are interrupted by Diana, who came and apologized for the wait. The girl's plan is taking place, and she already expects to see the saint's deformed face. Estia thanks the crown prince's wife for accepting the meeting, to which Diana replies that it is all due to her curiosity, pretending not to be interested in their dialogue. In her thoughts, the heroine was dissatisfied with being treated with disdain, but she still told the saint that she assured him of her good attitude. And then Diana notices the same ring that was made for her, but which was received by his wife, the Marchioness, who immediately noticed that the ring was recognized. The girl anxiously awaited the main character's reaction, but in the end only received a radiant smile, as if the saint were pretending she hadn't noticed anything. But Estia is not fooled so easily. She still noticed that the ring touched the saint, and she was simply pretending not to be disturbed. Unexpectedly, the heroine hands Diana an envelope containing a letter for her. And in it, there is something the crown prince must prepare for the future, because the girl has already shown that she can see the future. The Marchioness spoke of the enemy troops that, after checking the defenses, were going to attack the country. Her beloved Kaelis appears in front of the girl, whom she meets. Last time, Helios had a lot of trouble due to the attack, but this time everything will be different, because he was warned by Estia. It was also discussed last time that Helios accepted peace under very unfavorable conditions. And Kaelis would have handled it much better, because he was an outstanding diplomat. The saint was surprised that such important news was communicated to her, and not to the crown prince. To which Estia said she would like to know when the crown prince was going to hold the next tea party, which enraged the saint. Diana started saying this was too much, because the date of the tea party, and her guests were kept secret. Madame Harmony's lessons were not in vain, and the heroine was quickly able to pretend to regret what she had said. Diana quickly realized her mistake, because the information about the tea party didn't even come close to what Estia brought. It turned out that the date for the tea party had not yet been chosen, but as soon as something about it was known, the saint immediately sent a letter to Kael's wife. Subsequently, Diana remembered that she is the crown princess of the country, so she will not tolerate such treatment, since one must be more polite when addressing her. This one saw how much the beloved saint of everyone had changed, because now she has the power to change people. It all reminds me of a dream. The girl never expected to meet her love. She was sure that she would remain alone and unnoticed forever. And then Diana couldn't stand it and asked about the ring, and the heroine immediately started boasting and praising Kaelis to put the saint in an awkward position, while the heroine talked about how affectionate her husband was and when he managed to get such a rare stone. Diana didn't know whether to say that it was originally a gift just for her. Estia noticed that the saint had turned very pale and asked if it was because the jewel the heroine was showing was not magnificent enough for her eyes, which put her in a more difficult position. The crown princess stammered a lot while trying to answer something, and Estia only made things worse by saying that the color of the stone was very similar to the saint's hair. And then the Marchioness supposedly guessed that this ring was intended for Diana. And she shouted it surprised, waiting for a response from Helios's wife. But Diana remained silent, not mentioning that the ring was made for her, which disconcerted the heroine. However, Estia did not stop trying to find out information about the decoration, pretending to be very hurt by the whole situation. And the saint hurried to reassure the Marchioness, telling her that Kael did not want to offend her, and that he didn't intend anything bad. Diana was chosen as a villain, which was very unusual for her, and she began to apologize to Estia. Subsequently, the crown princess thanked the heroine because she saved Kael's life, to which the Marchioness replied that she was glad to be able to help her beloved person. But the happiness did not last long. Kaelis started to leave, and Estia tried to stop him, calling out to him. Estia noticed how strange Diana's state had become while uttering words, including a request to protect Kael as much as the heroine could. The girl was happy to be able to anger the crown prince's wife. As soon as the Marchioness returned, she immediately told the butler how the audience with the crown princess went. Hestia knows that when the Marquis is upset, he reads light novels, which once again surprised the butler with her knowledge of Kael. After the dialogue with the butler, the girl immediately rushed to tell her lover everything, who in turn asked first about Diana. Then, Kaelis remembered that Estia sees the future and asked if the saint would be happy in the future. And the girl was taken aback by such a question. The Marchioness understands that she cannot yet answer this question because she knows that the saint will soon cease to appear as such, because she will lose her healing ability. Last time, after Kaelis's death, the country faced a crisis. The marriage of the main characters began to collapse, and Diana lost her gift, losing her status as a saint. After this, everyone moved away from the protagonist because she became an ordinary girl. And the crown prince paid almost no attention to her because he was tired of political issues. The girl faced the question of whether to tell her beloved everything or keep it a secret. Kaelis turns around, not understanding why a girl unknown to him is calling him, and waits for an explanation of what she needs from him. The girl was worried that Kaelis might return to Diana, and he, as if reading her thoughts, replied that he no longer felt anything for the saint, but the Marchioness understands that all this is just a lie. And then the heroine decided to tell that Diana would soon lose her healing ability and cease to be a saint, which surprised Kael. Estia admitted that the abilities will disappear not only from the main one, but also from the girl herself, and she will no longer be able to see the future. Kael suggested that his wife would lose her abilities due to death, saying this very directly and bluntly, but the heroine admitted that she was not sure about this. There are no more than 2 years left until the end of the girl's memories, but this does not worry her, because the main thing for her is to have time to complete all planned tasks. And there is nothing to worry about Diana, because even if she loses her abilities, she herself will be alive and kicking. The Marquis abruptly leaves and tells Estia to forget about their dialogue and just leave. And because of this, the girl begins to worry that she said something wrong. Then, Estia arrives where Madame Harmonia and notices that the heroine does not look very well. The reason is that the girl has not slept well in recent days, as during this time, there has been no news of Kael or Diana. Harmony assumed that Estia was in this state due to her visit to the crown princess. And then the girl told the Marchioness the story of the ring. Estia said she was worried that Diana was trying to separate her from Kaelis, to expose the saint as two-faced in front of Madame. But Harmony came to the defense of the crown prince's wife, saying that she could not have acted with such cruelty. Because Diana is a loyal person who helps people, which means this is just some kind of misunderstanding. We find out that the girl fell asleep, and when she woke up, she found herself in the novel she was reading. Meeting her beloved, the girl seems to come alive. Now she does not feel so much pain, and still cannot believe that this is not a dream. She is very happy to see him. Then the heroine realized that Madame loved Diana very much, and there was no way to turn her against the saint. And in the end, Harmony decided that she would request an audience with Diana and talk to her personally to sort everything out. Madame was able to calm down and go home, but she really exhausted Estia, and the girl went to the garden to relax. An unexpected meeting took place in the garden because the girl ran into her beloved, who was holding a bouquet of flowers in his hands. After the heroine appeared in Kael's life, he began to feel better, and even started taking up floristry. The butler tried by all means to support his master, and brought him many flowers so that the Marquis would not give up this business. We learned that Kael received a letter from the Crown Prince, saying that thanks to Estia's prediction, it was possible to avoid a crisis on the border and save the country. Kaelis does not understand why the girl saved him when her predictions are so strong. And she spent them on a Marquis she didn't know. Having met Estia in the garden, Kael gives her a bouquet that he collected himself while practicing floristry. And the girl was very surprised by this, because he had never given her flowers before. And then Kael also says that he wants to tell the heroine something. And at this moment, common sense begins to gradually leave Estia. Because her beloved is very good, Estia abruptly shuts her mouth and does not allow him to say a word, and because of this, he is even more surprised. Without being able to say anything, the Marchioness immediately started trying to find out where her husband got the bouquet from, but she still wasn't ready to believe that he could give it to her. But Kael, noticing the girl's gaze towards the flowers and deciding that she really liked them, still gives it to her. Estia was crazy with happiness after this, that even Euros came running to help her. This is how the girl found out that her beloved was practicing floristry and also that he wanted to talk to her. But seeing her state, he decided to postpone everything for later. But the Marchioness convinced him to continue the dialogue, and now she was admiring the bouquets her husband had made. But then she remembered that there were no such scenes in the novel, and she began to worry about it. The young man noticed the change in the heroine's mood and decided that the reason was her anxiety. Thanks to her thoughts, Kael began to smile, and this was noticed by Hestia, who, although she didn't know why, was glad he smiled. And then Kaelis again tried to tell the girl important news, although she decided that their dialogue was already over. The Marquis wanted to know why the girl saved him, because there must be a reason for it. As a result, a misunderstanding arose, during which Hestia decided that Kael had guessed her love for him. And the hero himself thought that he was an important person in the future. It turns out that Kaelis is not only walking around, but hiding from men unknown to us who are looking for him. And so there was an awkward pause due to the fact that the heroine, without realizing it, revealed all her feelings to the Marquis, deciding that he already understood everything. And Kaelis himself only asked why she called him her favorite and what it meant, obviously still not fully understanding what he had just heard. Estia realized that she had spilled the beans and now doesn't know how to get out of the situation she got herself into. Kaelis begins to delve into the meaning of this word, trying to understand what it means to be called a favorite. And unable to resist the Marquis's inquisitive gaze, the girl admits that she called him her dearest person. The Marchioness tried to get out of the situation, but it was too late because whatever she said, everything led to the fact that she was in love. However, the hero decided that Estia was not in love with him, but with flowers. and he promised to give them to her more often. And this is how the heroine got away with it, which made her happy. And after that, a dialogue began in which Kael wanted to discuss something, and as it turned out, the topic of discussion was the Marchioness's abilities. Kael began to talk about the fact that Estia can change the present and therefore the future, which can be very useful. If you change events one after another, the future will also change. And this is a very important moment for the characters, because everything that happened last time can change. The girl is surprised not by the fact of the search, but by the fact that her lover is so close to her that he is practically squeezing her against him. Although this is also due to the fact that he is trying to hide. The Marquis is still sure that the heroine saved him only because she will be needed in some important event in the future. But due to Kael's death, she practically had no influence on anything. It's just that the heroine herself decided that, if he was alive, then everything would be much better, so you cannot accept his question. Due to Estia's long silence, the Marquis decided that the heroine was simply having a hard time talking about it, while in reality, she was just figuring out the best answer. Estia admitted that nothing would have changed if she hadn't saved him that day, and then the Marquis began to think that his life means nothing. And it changes nothing, which means all this is pointless. So the Marquis returned to thoughts of death, because he decided that there was no point in living anymore, that it wouldn't change anything, and that he wouldn't become a prominent or great person. Estia understands what Kael is talking about, because she is a secondary character, which means she is not as important as the main characters, who receive almost all the attention, while the rest simply end up in their shadow. But the heroine decides to convince the Marquis, telling him that he doesn't have to change the world to be great, because it is enough to become the meaning of one person's life. Then Estia admitted that Kael is the meaning of life for her, and she considers him great because she loves him. The butler came running at the heroine's cry, wondering what was happening with the heroes, and what they were doing, and at the same time informing them that dinner was ready. And then the Marquis burst out laughing wildly, surprising Estia and the butler, who did not understand what caused the laughter. While Kaelis tries to understand if he got carried away, Estia blushes with embarrassment and cannot move from her place. The Marchioness immediately thought that in the novel Kaelis only laughed next to Diana. Estia thought he was laughing because she looked stupid, but she was willing to accept it always. And when he was happy in the end, stopping laughing, Kael turned to Euros and told him he wanted to ask him something, to which the butler immediately replied. Kaelis's request was that the butler provide him and his wife Gestia with a pleasant dinner. But the girl was so worried that she couldn't even appreciate the taste of the food brought to her. But even in such an awkward situation, the heroine was glad that Kael laughed and saw him from different sides. Hoping that thanks to her the Marquis would feel better, the girl thought that finally she could sleep normally without worrying about anything. But when Estia entered her room, she was so astonished by what she saw that she froze in place, unable to move. The girl saw something she obviously did not expect to see in her room. After all, the Marchioness's room was filled with flowers, and she was surprised not knowing what all that meant. Kaelis finally lets the girl go and apologizes to her. And she understands that there is no point in him apologizing, because she really liked the way he hugged her close to him. And she would have stayed like that all day. And then the girl sees the bouquet of flowers that Kael made and realizes it was his idea. Estia remembered that before this, her beloved had promised to give her more flowers if she liked them so much. Now it is clear what exactly the Marquis asked the butler for, but the girl decided that it was definitely not Kael who prevented such a quantity of flowers from being brought, but Euros himself. No matter whose idea it was, the heroine was satisfied with so much attention in any case. While Gestia enjoyed the flowers, Kaelis was in his room, thinking about everything that had happened before. And now we see the girl at work again. This time, she writes a short letter about the current situation, because there was no response from Diana. And the heroine could not contact the Countess. It turns out that a banquet will be held, and the Marchioness is not sure if they are ready to host it. The letter is already written, all that remains is to send it and then find euros, because she herself cannot arrange the flowers. There were too many flowers, but Estia really likes it, because now she can constantly admire them. But instead of euros, Estia only found piles of papers with which the entire table was filled. A dialogue takes place between Estia and Kaelis, in which the girl tries to find out who is looking for the boy and how she can help him. Due to so many papers, the girl at first didn't even realize that there was a butler among them. Euros looked very tired and sick, and the only thing he says is that his master must be taken care of, although it seems that he needs care first. So the heroine began to try to wake up Euros so he would come to his senses. Upon waking, Euros admitted that he sleeps less than 3 hours daily due to the large amount of work. While Estia was worried about Euros, he was worried about looking embarrassed, without even thinking that such a burden should not be imposed on himself. Since his master cannot take care of his own affairs, the butler has to work on his behalf. But Estia noticed that Euros was fine until yesterday and asked what happened. It turned out that the butler was only dealing with urgent matters, and before that he did not sleep 3 hours a day. It was surprising that Estia made Kael laugh, because before his laughter could be heard very rarely. Which means that the heroine can somehow command the marquis. And in this case, Euros invited Estia to take care of the household chores on the estate. But the problem is that the girl had never done anything like this before. In a mountain house, whose path is very confusing, he finally doesn't feel alone, because the girl invites her beloved there. Subsequently, the girl also suggested that the young man would not allow this, to which Euros said that he was ready to ask him that right now. And the marquis himself at that moment was having a tea ceremony on his terrace. And as soon as Estia found out about this, there was no trace of her, because she instantly ran to her beloved. While important matters were being resolved, Kaelis sat alone on the terrace and drank tea in a relaxed position. The hero asked the Marchioness what had happened, to which she replied that she had run over because urgent questions were arising. In response to this, Kaelis invited the girl to have tea with him, which he was about to pour. Which pleased Estia, of course, but then she realized that there was no time for that. The heroine had to run, so at that moment she could barely say anything because she first needed to catch her breath. When Estia refused tea, Kael asked her if she liked the tea, to which she replied affirmatively. And then she began to wonder how she could refuse tea with her beloved. But the marquis didn't let her think, telling her to forget about the tea and sit down because he needed to talk. Estia was very annoyed by the fact that she refused tea with her loved one. But nothing can be done. Kaelis is worried that Estia is causing trouble and doesn't even realize that she has known him for a long time. And while the heroine was sad about the missed opportunity, Kael asked her exactly why she was looking for him. Then the girl noticed that her husband's gaze softened and became less cold. And the marquis began to look at Estia differently. But then Estia realized that his gaze was not soft, but simply studied, as if she were some kind of extraordinary insect. However, this appearance is still better than the lifeless one he had before, which means that Kael's condition is improving. Sitting in front of her beloved, the heroine thinks about how much she would like to forget yesterday. But in the end, the girl organized her thoughts and remembered to tell the marquis about Euros's wish for her to take charge of the estate. Kaelis knew that the butler had a lot of work, so he wasn't even surprised by this proposal, because it is difficult for Euros to do it all alone. The marquis took this as an indication that he had been lazy for a long time. But the girl insisted that she wanted to help him herself. But if the hero is against it, the Marchioness will no longer demand this. Then Estia heard Kael's confession that before he couldn't entrust work to others, and he did everything himself. While the hero is worried about the inconvenience he causes, the girl cannot believe what she sees, because her object of desire is sitting right in front of her. But now the marquis lives freely, and he doesn't understand why he didn't allow himself to live like that in the past. The heroine would like to lighten Kael's burden and help him in everything. It was unusual for Kael to hear this, because before that, few people showed such concern for him. The spouses sat opposite each other, and each thought about something different. In the end, the girl managed to persuade her beloved, who allowed her to help the butler. Now Kael also decided to share his news, and said that a letter had arrived from Hyperion. The girl was not happy that Helios needed something from Kael again, because last time everything ended in tears. But after seeing the text of the letter, Estia realized that it was not written for Kaelis at all. This message turns out to be for the Marchioness herself, and in it, the Crown Prince writes that he would like to meet the girl in person, because her abilities helped him a lot. The heroine wanted to use her knowledge only for her beloved, and now was simply thinking of rejecting the prince's invitation. Estia turned out to be a simple girl, but very rich without family. The dialogue between the characters continues, during which the heroine tries to learn all the information of interest. But before refusing, she decided to ask what the Marquis's opinion on this matter was. Kael does not understand why the heroine needs his opinion, but the girl explains it by saying that she is now a Marchioness, and that this is a letter from the Crown Prince, and the fact that they meet secretly can lead to many strange rumors. The hero was amused by the girl's confidence that he wouldn't find out about the secret meeting. The Marchioness was so impressed by the words spoken by Kael that she seemed to have forgotten how to breathe. After some time, the meaning of everything her beloved said reached her. And at that very moment, she became very indignant because she does not want to do anything without the knowledge of her beloved. Estia is also not happy with the fact that she will have to see the Crown Prince because he offended Kael. Kael, meanwhile, reflects in silence on everything his wife just told him. And in the Marquis's thoughts, there are also memories of the day Diana confessed to him that she was in love with someone else. His best friend Helios. The boy admits that he wanted to disappear from this world, which leaves the girl in shock and makes her tense. The saint then stated that no one could hate the Crown Prince, and here, in front of him, sits a girl who cannot stand him. It was clear how difficult it was for the girl to make the decision to invite Helios, because too much was at stake. Meanwhile, Kaelis thinks about how different Diana and Estia are, and this makes him smile imperceptibly. The choice was made at the moment Kael said it was better for the girl to go to the meeting. And then he still decided to accept the invitation. The heroine constantly calls her husband Marquis, so he couldn't stand it, and asked her if this irritates her. The young man asks to call him by his name, because no one calls the Marquis's wife that. So there is no need to constantly call him Marquis. Because of these words, the girl felt embarrassed, and the fact that her beloved was as close as possible only made the situation worse. For the first time, Estia addresses the Marquis by his name in a very low, timid voice, as if she were afraid of saying something wrong. And when the girl realized that nothing would happen to her for saying the name, she let herself go and shouted it at the top of her lungs. Kaelis did not expect this and looked surprised at Estia, who was recovering from a loud scream. Estia understands, because she would also like to disappear from this world to return to hers, and finally see her friends and family. After this, the girl quickly withdrew, leaving the Marquis alone with his thoughts. It seems that when the heroine screamed, she scared Kael so much that he even spilled his tea. And only now did he realize it. Estia once again made the young man smile in these few days, which means her plan is working. And the Marquis is getting better. Meanwhile, the girl, embarrassed, tried to run as far away from her beloved as possible so as not to worry even more. Here the focus is on Helios, who looks at the heroine's room like some kind of museum. Estia is not very happy with the meeting with the Crown Prince, but she was forced to accept it. Helios came not as Crown Prince, but on behalf of Hyperion, so I had to meet him in the room. And not in the open living room. The exploration of Estia's room did not stop, and she was already starting to get very angry about this. Then the Crown Prince noticed the girl's documents on the table and asked her if she was responsible for the Marquis's internal affairs. To which Estia gave a positive answer. It turned out that the Marchioness had many amazing talents, and this surprised the main character. The young man notices how similar he is to the heroine, because both cannot see those they love and miss so much. And then Estia was offered to use her power for the good of the country, because the heroine had already saved him once. But in response to this, the heroine only replied that she would pretend not to have heard these words. The Marchioness explained that for her now her husband's health is paramount, so she will focus on him and on taking her home. Although the Crown Prince tried to show the girl that domestic matters are no more important than the country's problems, the heroine said that her foresight did not concern state affairs. Then Helios asked why she mentioned the attack, to which the Marchioness replied that this was done to get information about the date of Her Majesty's tea party. The main character tried to threaten Estia, but she noticed that today she had a meeting with Mr. Hyperion. Not with the prince, so she had nothing to fear. According to the man, it is very selfish that the heroine uses her power only for personal gain. Estia noticed that the Crown Prince abandoned only his friend, who is her husband. And now she cannot help but think about it, because she loves Kael very much. His Highness wants to somehow take the initiative in the conversation, because the one with whom she is dialoguing is very outspoken. And suddenly, Helios begins to cough after drinking the tea, and it turns out that this is because the drink tastes exactly the same as when Diana prepares it. We hear the story of Kaelus's broken heart again, but from his lips, because he doesn't know that the heroine has known everything about him for a long time. Even a saint has flaws. For example, she doesn't know how to make tea and instead produces tasteless water. At first, Estia was angry because they compared her tea to the most tasteless one in the entire novel. But then the heroine tasted it herself, and all indignation disappeared. In any case, Helios did not want to lose the knowledge that the Marchioness had. So he asked her what she wanted. Then the girl demanded the land of the deceased Duke Orcus, as well as elevating the status and the title of her husband. Estia wanted to prove that she is the opposite of Diana, and at the same time emphasize that Kael is not to blame for the death of Duke Orcus's daughter. She wondered if the Crown Prince would be able to fulfill these demands for the sake of important information. But to answer this question, one must consult the Emperor, because Helios himself cannot decide this. The heroine didn't care about all this, because the main thing was that her demands were met. And only then would she share her abilities. Although Helios understands that it will be difficult to find a reason to fulfill these conditions, he accepts them and will even promise in writing to fulfill them. The Crown Prince accepted the terms without further clarification, which greatly pleased the heroine. Life without friends and without love is hard, but the hero still understands that death will not be a solution for him. While everyone underestimates Estia, she plans to elevate Kaelus to the very heavens of this empire. And the next day, the Marchioness finally received a letter from Diana stating the date of the tea party. As soon as he received a letter from Diana about the tea party, he immediately went to Countess Irina's to tell her about it. The Countess felt flattered by the Marchioness's personal visit, so the women established good friendly relations. It turned out that Diana wants to gather all the nobles at once, because she would like to hold as few such meetings as possible. And if there are many people, it is most likely that the Crown Prince's wife will need Madame Harmony's help. The Countess did not like the presence of a lady in the secular world who had the same influence. Estia realized that the Countess liked her, so she decided to take advantage of this fact. So the heroine said that she did not understand why Madame was helping Diana in such an important event. And once again, the Marchioness was favored with flattery, because she began to tell the Countess that it would be better if Diana chose Irina's to help in such an important event. The Countess replied that she thought so too, and that's why she was glad to have found someone who understood her so much. Kaelus admits that he is weak and believes that the heroine is much stronger than him, because even when he feels bad, she does not want to die. However, His Majesty does not trust the nobles due to the flood that occurred last year, because they did not take care of the citizens. During that flood, the saint first asked the king to help the people. But achieving nothing, she turned to the nobles. The nobles could not do anything, and then it was Helios and Kael who helped Diana. It was in caring for the flood victims that Helios's love was born and strengthened. And his current wife, and at that moment Kael was drafting documents instead of the Crown Prince. After Estia added that if the Countess wishes, the heroine will be able to make a couple of cracks in the walls of Her Majesty's castle. A plan was devised in which the Marchioness would make Diana look bad at the tea party. And then the Countess would intervene and help Her Majesty, after which their relationship would improve. And in return for this, Erinis should become Estia's guardian in the secular world. As a companion, the Countess is still thinking about the Marchioness's proposal, but the girl is sure that Erinis will definitely agree. All high society people are now on the Marchioness's side, which she could not help but rejoice about. Moreover, when the girl returned home, but received Helios's letter of appointment and an imperial pass, which means that His Majesty probably urgently needs the heroine's gift. The girl understands that her beloved has not felt better after difficult events, not even after a long time. It remains to find out how things are going with Diana's preparations for the reception. And this can be done when Estia goes to predict. It will even be possible to talk to the servants. And then, Estia began to choose an event that could be predicted in order to go to the imperial palace as quickly as possible. But before telling Helios this prediction, the Marchioness initially decided to share everything with her husband. Estia fell asleep thinking that tomorrow everything would go as well as today. The next day, the girl couldn't understand how it was possible that she and her beloved were traveling together in one carriage. It happened that the girl went one more time to tell Kael about her plans, and he asked her if she would go to the castle. And before that, the Marquis was getting a curly haircut, which surprised Estia. Because he did it well, Kael reiterated that his wife did not have to answer him, but explained that he did not want what he was going to tell Helios to be only between Estia and the crown prince. But what should the heroine do if her beloved does not want to hear what she wants to talk about? And then he added that in this case, he would say nothing. However, the Marquis was only concerned about the fact that Estia called him Lord Kaelis, which seemed strange to the man because she could simply call him by his name. Unfortunately, the hero became even sadder over time. Then, Kael wondered what information the heroine would tell the crown prince first. And the heroine said it would be the news that His Majesty the Emperor would soon fall. In the end, it turned out that the Emperor had an unknown illness, and therefore Diana poured all her healing powers onto him day and night, and at the moment the Emperor falls, the Saintess uses her powers for the last time. It was unknown if this message could somehow prevent what was about to happen. But then everyone would be prepared for any outcome. Kael lost his parents early, so, together with his best friend Helios, he respected the Emperor greatly and was devoted to him. And His Majesty, in turn, considered Kael practically his own son and was delighted with him. And it was at that moment that the Marquis said he would go to the castle with his wife. Because of this unexpected desire from her beloved, the heroine was still in shock. However, the girl was not only surprised, but also very scared, because she didn't know how Kael would behave if he met Diana. The Marquis, in turn, seemed to read his fiancée's thoughts and told the heroine not to worry about the fact that the young man's feelings for Diana might flare up. Again, because he was going to the Emperor and not to his past love. The girl, as someone who had been following Kaelis for a long time, immediately noticed all the changes in him and the fact that he was starting to look much worse. Then Estia explained to her beloved that it is not so important to her how he feels. The main thing is that he does not repeat the mistakes he made and that the heroine saw before. After all, the heroine herself may disappear in 2 years, but at this moment, her goal is to make Diana. And Helios regret it. Kael decided that both could go about their business and return at different times. But the Marchioness feared that her husband would get sick and she wouldn't be able to help him. This offended the man because he is not a child and is not that weak, so he can handle everything himself. In the end, the heroes really separated, and Estia noticed that this behavior was very similar to the behavior of the Marquis from the original novel. While Estia was on cloud 9, she suddenly heard a dialogue between the maids, in which they discussed the scale of Diana's tea party. The servants were not happy with the way the tea party would be held, and the Marchioness guessed that clearly something was wrong. And then, one of the workers let slip that she was already tired of seeing Madame Merope argue. And Diana every day. Madame Merope is a lady-in-waiting who served the deceased empress and is the most experienced figure in the palace. And Estia was glad that Diana could not get along with such an important woman for the palace. These characters usually appear in stories for a reason, but to change the plot. Taking the hero by surprise, Estia suddenly runs away and promises to return soon. In a good mood, the heroine went to the crown prince, who was surprised by such a quick visit. While the heroine was thinking about how to more carefully tell Helios information about his father. He reprimanded her, asking if it was normal to look so closely at others when there was a husband. Because of the crown prince's rudeness, the heroine stopped trying to convey the information quietly, and simply said directly that His Majesty the Emperor would soon fall. Helios began to argue with the girl, arguing that in the last check the doctor noticed nothing strange about his father. But Estia added that she did not know the exact cause or the day of the incident, and simply told him what she saw in the future. Then the crown prince asked if there was any way to avoid it, to which Estia replied that, although she could not give a guarantee, she advised always keeping someone close to the emperor to be able to provide immediate help. Although the saint used her power on the emperor every night, the fact of his fall confirms that all life has a deadline, even with the support of divine forces. And then the chief chamberlain of the Lily Palace, Zenon, appears with the words that His Majesty called him. Then Helios ordered him to go to the emperor immediately, and added that he would also come soon. Afterwards, the crown prince wanted Diana to also approach her father. But Estia forbade him, because she knew that Kael was there at that moment and would not want to meet the one who broke his heart. It turned out that Helios's wife had already gone to see the emperor to have tea with him. The girl decides that what is still holding her back in this novel is that she needs to help her beloved Kael, and she is ready for anything to bring back his will to live. While the heroes hurried to the imperial palace, the crown prince asked Estia if the cause of his father's death could be poisoning, hinting at how terrible the tea prepared by Diana is. Meanwhile, the protagonist of the novel was happy to finally be able to speak with the emperor. And then Diana realizes the last person she expected to see, because it turned out close to him. In the end, what Estia feared happened, because her beloved met the one he had loved for many years. After a while, the Marchioness ran to the palace, and when Kael saw her, he said he had told the girl not to come looking for him. But then the young man realized that the crown prince had also rushed to the palace with his wife, which did not make him happy. And then the Marquis grabbed Estia's hand to leave this place as quickly as possible. At this moment, the heroine realizes that her beloved has met the saint. The girl could not even imagine what Kael was feeling now, but she could only guess because the man showed no signs of suffering. Then Estia tries to cheer up Kael, telling him that he is handling it well. There is a possibility that delicious food, sleep, walks, and good company will help the hero feel better. But the Marquis took her words negatively, saying that the heroine knows nothing because her ability does not allow her to see through people. And after the man's words, the girl apologized to him, knowing that Kael just needed to let go of his emotions. This evening, Estia decided to drink a couple of glasses of wine, reflecting on the fact that, first of all, she should not have allowed her beloved to enter the palace. After all, the Marchioness understands that Diana was most likely careless in her interactions with the Marquis. After this encounter, Kael remained silent for the rest of the time. And although Euros took care of him, Estia also wanted to go see him. But she was scared. Kael's office is so close to the heroine that you can see it from the balcony. But his heart is incredibly far away. And then, the girl realizes that she was not the only one who went out to admire the night sky. Perhaps Kaelis went out at such a late hour to commit suicide again, and that's why Estia quickly ran to him. Having run to her husband, the heroine first met Euros, and he told her that her beloved only wanted to get some fresh air. Then, with a calmer heart, the girl was about to leave, but Kael stopped her. And Euros asked her to leave. Unfortunately, all dreams collapse in an instant when Kaelis is found lying on the floor, covered in blood, and next to him is a dagger, which is the culprit for everything that happened. And although Estia was nervous that the butler would leave her alone with the Marquis, she got too close to her. It turned out that Kael wanted to apologize to the heroine for what happened during the day, because he was harsh with her afterward. Timidly, Estia could still ask how her beloved was now, to which the man replied that he took a short nap and is much better now. Estia is very embarrassed by how close Kael is, because this way she sees all his beauty. Whereby the hero asks her why she doesn't look at him. And the reason is that this will worry her even more. And then the Marquis said that he saw his wife drinking wine on the terrace, which means he saw her inappropriate behavior when she was emotionally talking to herself. And she was drinking straight from the bottle. But instead of condemnation, Estia only received an offer from Kael to have a drink with him. The heroine began to feel like she was in a dream, because at that moment, she was drinking wine with her beloved late at night in his office. In the end, the girl decided that since such an opportunity had arisen, she was going to admire Kael to the fullest. Because of her thoughts, Estia blushed completely, and then the Marquis approached her to find out what caused this. And what happened? In this state, the heroine finds Kael, and everything she bought for him also falls to the floor, because the girl's hands at that very moment are pressed against her face. And then, to dispel the romance of the moment, the heroine asked her husband if Diana had any reaction to his meeting with Kael. In the end, the girl realized that this was not the best question. But the Marquis had already begun to tell how the saint was momentarily astonished. But then he came to his senses and began to treat his old friend as before. Then the crown prince's wife and Kael went before the emperor together. But the man barely spoke to his majesty, because the saint monopolized all his attention. Kael was disappointed that, no matter what he did, Diana still treated him the same as before. Which means that all his attempts to change this were in vain. So Estia could not stand it, and said that what is done in the name of love will never be useless. After all, Kael knows how to love, and that is where his happiness lies. And then the heroine promised that she would do everything in her power to make him happy. The girl was about to leave when Kael first wanted to tell her something, but then changed his mind. So Estia decided that since they wanted to tell her something, the dialogue should continue the next day. Estia does not believe that she could allow this to happen because she left for a short time. And she was sure that she could help her beloved. But the Marchioness's plans were not destined to come true because she had a lot to do, including learning about land management and lessons from Madame Harmony. While the girl was lying down and thinking about all her affairs, she suddenly remembered that she had forgotten something important, namely, choosing a dress for a tea party. And since all the seamstresses were already busy because of the tea party, Estia decided that she would modify the dress herself. After all, everyone at the tea party will notice the heroine's appearance. So she needs to look good, and in the end, Madame supported her in this endeavor. Harmony also offered Estia a tailor named Decamer, who, although he looked intimidating, was good at his job. But the problem is that Decamer is from common people, which confuses many. But Estia didn't care, because the main thing is skills. The heroine showed the tailor the dress she wanted to modify, and then several pieces of jewelry that might also be useful to her. And after that, Decamer began to bombard the girl with questions about what she liked about dresses. But the heroine simply said that the tailor should decide everything himself. The main thing is that it suits her. And then Decamer suddenly began to say that he had come up with the perfect sketch. And then he ran off to draw it. The girl is completely shattered, because her last hope of understanding the meaning of her presence in this novel is broken like her heart. Talking to Estia, Harmony began to say what a great girl she is and how much she has achieved. And then Madame's words hit the heroine, because Harmony noticed that it would be good if the crown prince's wife behaved like Estia. But even after all the rumors about Diana, Madame continued to trust her. And then the tailor burst in again with the women, saying that he had many ideas for the Marchioness. Dekimaru was so inspired that he made too many sketches, and then asked the heroine to choose the one she liked the most. The tailor was very worried whether the Marchioness would like anything, and already began to think that she was not satisfied with everything. And all this time Dakimaru had his shirt unbuttoned, and seeing this he began to worry even more. All the sketches were beautiful, but this one seemed to be missing something, because all the dresses looked exactly like aristocrats' dresses. And then the girl saw another design, but the tailor said it was drawn just to stretch her arms. However, in the end, it was this sketch that the heroine chose. After a while, preparations for the tea party began, and therefore, there was a lot of noise in Kael's palace, which he really did not like. People mourned the hero's death only for a day, and then happily forgot everything, and continued to live as if nothing had happened. Then Euros explained to the Marquis that everyone was making a fuss because Estia was going to His Majesty's tea party, which would take place that day. And then the butler told Kael that the Marchioness had to modify her current dress due to lack of time, even though she wanted a new one. Then the Marquis said that the heroine should have asked him for help and that he would have solved everything with money. But Estia said more than once that she did not want to use her husband's property. In the end, the dress was ready, and the girl looked so beautiful that you couldn't take your eyes off her. And although everyone was worried about altering the dress, all worries were in vain. And while Estia was thanking the tailor, the maids were surprised that the dress was made by such a person because the dress is very elegant, which cannot be said about Dekimar's physique. The design of this dress was the simplest of all the presented ones, so they even tried to dissuade her, thinking that this was not a dress for a tea party with His Majesty. But he still insisted because he wanted an elegant dress to show off. And so that the dress would not look too simple, it was decorated with mother-of-pearl shells. Although this idea was wonderful, Dakimaru had to try very hard to bring it to life. One could even say that the tailor put his whole soul into creating the dress. And they forgot about the terrible news, only because it was overshadowed by another that the main characters of the novel. Diana and Helios had a scandal that surprised everyone. Estia was very grateful to Dakimaru and said that next time she would turn to him for help. And while they were communicating, Kael approached them with the words that the door was open. This is the first time the Marquis himself came to his wife, which scared her because she decided that something had happened. Kael looked at the dress for the first time and noticed that it didn't even look like it had been altered. And then the Marquis gave Estia a large bag with money and told the girl to give it to the tailor, thanks to which he could open his own clothing store. As soon as Kael gave him the money, he left immediately and simply said goodbye to the heroine. Estia is so beautiful, and her beloved did not say anything about it. But the heroine understands that he is willing to call only Diana beautiful. But suddenly, the Marquis turned and looking at the girl, said that this dress suits her. However, Estia decided that he said the compliment as a farewell, and not because he really meant it. But the Marchioness was also pleased with this, so she thanked her beloved for coming to cheer her up. It turns out that the love between the spouses has cooled down, despite the fact that they have been in a happy marriage for over 2 years. In front of Euros, Kael began to make excuses that he only wanted his reputation not to be spoiled. And that's why he went to Estia to look at the dress and nothing more. At the tea party, the Marchioness met Countess Erinys, who noticed that Estia was in a good mood, and that the Countess herself was expectant. As Erinys promised, she was going to become a loyal ally of the heroine, although she is not sure if this is right. The event itself took place in the Emperor's main palace, because Helios listened to the girl's advice so that at least someone would be with the Emperor at all times. Then the wife of the Empire's crown prince, Diana, appeared, captivating all eyes. And Estia at that moment was thinking that there could be a better day to show the true face of the novel's main character. In the end, it turned out that the heroine was given a seat at the same table as the crown prince's wife, due to her status as Marchioness. Everyone was very kind and flattering to Diana, which Estia really did not like, listening to all these praises towards the crown prince's wife. And the heroine understands that it will be difficult to find time for her speech. At first glance, everyone treated Diana very well and even admired her. Estia tried in every possible way to make eye contact with the saint, but failed because Diana constantly looked away. The extra character lives a carefree life and spends money as she pleases. Along with Kael, the girl's will to live also died, because all meaning was gone. She doesn't know how to get out, and what to do in this world alien to her. And then sweets were brought to the event, which were prepared by the crown prince's wife herself. From Diana's point of view, she wanted to convey her message criticizing the luxury of the aristocrats. But in this way, she would never convince anyone. No matter what Diana did, everyone praised her, and it turns out that all her life the saintess walked on a path of flowers. Protected from troubles. Suddenly, the Marchioness realized that the crown prince's wife was doing all this so as not to forget her peasant origins. And although these sweets bring memories to Estia, to others it seems rustic. And then the heroine asked if something happened to Diana with Madame Merope, because her influence isn't felt here. And Madame herself is absent from the event. Then Diana started making excuses, saying she just wanted to do everything her own way so that this tea party would not be like all the others. But these words did not convince others, and the crown prince's wife was finally supported only by Estia, saying that everyone would definitely understand the deeper meaning that Her Highness put into this action. After this, Diana asked the Marchioness to dress more appropriately next time, showing that she could defend herself from Estia's words. The girl did not know whether she could answer Her Highness or if she should simply ignore her comment. Estia went to the temple every day and simply wandered, because all the meaning of her life was lost forever. And she didn't know at all what to do next. But then, Erinis came to the Marchioness's aid, double-clicking the saucer, which was a sign that Estia could say what she wanted, and the Countess would pick it up in the right place. Then, the heroine began to say that there was a misunderstanding, because this dress was altered from one of her favorite outfits. And it shines because it is covered with shells and not precious stones. And although everyone was surprised by the fact that this dress had been altered, its beauty eclipsed this fact. And in the end, other girls started telling Estia that they couldn't take their eyes off her. This dress was so incredible. Everyone was especially impressed by the shells on the outfit, so everyone started asking the heroine who her tailor was. And then he admitted that the tailor who created this dress is a commoner. At that moment, Erinis noticed that if they hadn't told her, she would never have thought that this masterpiece dress was created by a commoner. And then the Countess added that she would also like to entrust this tailor with making a dress for her. And after the Countess's words, everyone supported the idea of modifying the dresses. And this confused Diana, because she spent a lot of money on her dress. If the crown prince's wife was going to serve simple delicacies, then she should have done it in an aristocratic style. And then this idea would have succeeded. But Diana made a mistake in this, and therefore no one supported her. Everything in life has gone downhill, and there is nothing left but to think about what happened and what will never happen. And on top of everything, Diana's strength began to weaken. And then the Countess asked Estia why it was necessary to alter a commoner's outfit. If she was a Marchioness and could create a beautiful and expensive dress for herself. And then Erinis clarified whether Marquis Kaelis allocates a generous budget to his wife. Or not. Estia did not expect this from the Countess and therefore remained silent for a second, reflecting on the question. In the end, the heroine's surprise turned out to be feigned because before the event. The girl agreed with the Countess that the dialogue should naturally turn to talking about Kael. Estia began to say that, as a wife, the Marquis completely respects her, and during these words she closely observed Diana's reaction. When the girl said she respected her husband, Erinis recalled how the crown prince openly criticized the Marquis's coldness. This was due to an incident where Kael wanted to help the main characters by poisoning Duke Orcus and his daughter, and therefore the Marchioness does not believe that her beloved did anything wrong. And then Estia asked Diana what she thought, and if she thought Kael had done anything wrong. But what is also important is the fact that the Marquis committed this crime not only for loved ones, but also because the Dukes of Orcus were a family that committed shameful acts, such as selling children as slaves and killing everyone who stood in their way. Kael did everything himself because he forbade Helios from helping him so that he would not establish the royal family. Thus we arrived at the moment from which the story itself began. The Marchioness explained to His Majesty that the Orcus family was dangerous for the throne because they could start a rebellion. So the civil war stopped. To which Diana replied that the end does not justify the means, and in any case, Kaelis committed a bad act that violates the laws of the empire. And then Estia asked why her husband was not punished, as he had committed such a terrible crime. As a result, the saint found herself in a difficult situation because there is no right answer to the question asked of her. And then Countess Erinys defended Diana, saying that she was not obliged to answer anything to the question posed, because this could upset His Majesty. Then Estia apologized if she had offended her, and then said that she hoped they would generously forgive her. The protection of Countess Diana was also part of Estia and Erinys's plan, so with joyful thoughts, the heroine said she would go out to clear her mind. When the Marchioness left, she could finally relax, because she would return just in time for the end of the tea party. And then the Crown Prince approached Estia, while she was resting and breathing fresh air, which was a surprise for the girl. The Marchioness began to think why Helios approached her, because there must be some reason for it. The heroine prays to God to save her beloved while she is in the temple, when suddenly everything turns white. The heroine was so confused that she didn't even greet the Crown Prince, to whom he made a remark. Afterwards, Helios asked why the Marchioness was sitting here alone, while Diana's tea party was still ongoing. He asked if something had happened between the girls, guessing that the heroines didn't treat each other very well. And then Estia asked the Crown Prince a reciprocal question about what he was also doing alone in this place. In the end, it turned out that the prince was heading to a tea party, and when it was the girl's turn to answer the question, she explained that she had disrespected His Majesty, and that's why she decided to clear her mind. Then Helios began to worry, asking what the Marchioness had said to offend Diana. To which Estia replied that she simply wanted to restore her husband's honor. At first, the Crown Prince thought that the Marchioness was using Kael to fight Diana. But the girl made it clear that she was doing all this only because she loved her husband. A few hours earlier, when Estia went to a tea party, a letter arrived at the Marquis's house asking a man to visit the imperial palace to discuss the rights of Ilion. Kael understood that he would have to go to the palace, but as soon as he thought that he might meet Diana again, he felt bad. As a result, the Marquis decided to go to the Emperor on the day when he definitely would not meet His Majesty, because she would be at a tea party. We see a richly furnished room and realize that the girl has returned to living as before. That day, after a long time, Kael managed to meet Emperor Irius, and he was able to talk to him. In the end, it turned out that the hero was called to the palace not to discuss problems, but to tell him about his wife. And then the Marquis told the Emperor that although his wife was reckless, the man knew for sure that she sincerely cared about him. His Majesty noticed that this girl definitely loved the Marquis very much, which surprised the hero, because it was difficult for him to imagine that someone who didn't know him could fall in love with him. Therefore, Kael still doesn't understand what exactly pushes Estia to do the things she does for her husband's sake. And when the Marquis was returning, he unexpectedly saw his wife, who, instead of being at the tea party, was communicating with Helios. Just at that moment, the heroine told the Crown Prince that she loved her husband. But His Majesty does not believe this, because before the wedding, the Marquis and the girl were still strangers. And then he asked Estia to explain why she loves Kael so much. The girl seemed to have been preparing for this question for a long time, answering it in great detail, fully describing everything she likes and admires about Kael. The prince had already started trying to stop Estia, but the heroine did not want to stop, saying that she hadn't told everything yet. Estia does not understand how it happened that she was in the temple, and then, surprisingly, she ended up in her old room. And all these words were heard by the one they were about, and then the Marquis began to think that maybe the girl really loved him. Afterwards, the heroine and Helios went for tea, and still she couldn't say anything to Diana, because her husband was nearby, so the remaining time passed well for the saint. As a result, Estia decided that she would ask Erinys to find out the public opinion about Diana. The heroine was already thinking that she would be home soon, when suddenly she couldn't believe what she saw when she saw her beloved. So the girl immediately ran to the marquis, asking if everything was all right, and what he was doing here, to which the man replied that he simply had business with the emperor. And that's why he decided to wait for the heroine so that we could go home together. And at the end of his words, Kael addressed the girl affectionately, calling her Jessie, which caused the girl's heart to almost explode. But although Estia was very happy, she still did not understand why Kael suddenly turned kindly towards her and waited to travel together. And then the Marchioness also realized that she hadn't told her husband a word about where she would be and where to wait for her. When the couple arrived, Kael wanted to help Estia out of the carriage, giving her his hand, and called affectionately again. In the end, the heroine dared and still extended her hand to her beloved, thanking him for his help. The heroine's health was excellent, which was no less surprising than her unexpected move. After this, the heroine was so happy that she no longer even remembers what she was doing when she arrived, and how she ended up in her room. As a result, the heroine immediately went to bed, leaving all matters for later. Even the diary, which she wanted to put in order and make new plans. And while Estia fell asleep with happy thoughts, Diana, meanwhile, was worried that she was indeed wrong. Still thinking about what happened at the tea party, Diana thought about why Kael was really not punished, and then added that she could not say anything in response to the Marchioness. And after all this, the Crown Prince asked his wife if perhaps they should make peace with Kael, because they used to be best friends. However, Diana was not going to forgive Kael. Even though the main characters were indebted to the Marquis, she did not want to give up her beliefs. And His Majesty finally started crying, and her husband immediately rushed to comfort her and apologize for bringing up this topic. The next day, Euros brought Estia 2 letters, one of which was from Madame Harmony, and the other from His Highness, the Crown Prince. Although Madame's letter was expected, Helios's turned out to be a real surprise, because he still had no reason to write to the heroine. His Majesty's letter stated that he had heard about everything the Marchioness did to Diana at the tea party. So Estia would have to come and apologize to the princess. And then, Estia understands what is happening and where she is, because she recognizes an identical view to the one that was on Diana's wedding night. In hell, of course, Estia did not like the prince's order to apologize to Diana. The heroine even crumpled the letter because of how angry she was. And although, thanks to Helios, the tea party ended on a good note, rumors still run that the Crown Prince's wife still despises the aristocracy. And that's why she organized such a simple reception. The girls' plans did not include the Crown Prince interfering in Hestia's attempts to turn public opinion away from Diana. At first, the Marchioness simply ignores them all, but she realizes that then they could arrest her for insulting the imperial family. So Hestia decided to get an audience with Diana first, thinking how tired she was from so many things to do. The butler, seeing how the Marchioness's mood had worsened because of the letter, decided to distract and cheer her up with all sorts of little things, like tea or coffee. And while Euros ran to get a cup of tea, Estia decided to read Madame's letter. And what was written in it left the heroine stunned. Meanwhile, the maid took the tray from the butler, with the word that this was part of her duties. So she herself would bring the tray for the Marchioness. The argument between the servants was useless, because Estia urgently ran somewhere, and there could be no talk of tea. And it turned out that Estia ran to the Marquis to tell him some very important news. And meanwhile, the Marquis was painting a picture without expecting anyone. An unknown force moved the heroine to the end of the novel, and now she will have to find out why it did so. The reason for the heroine's haste was that she learned the news that the temple had begun to openly criticize the Marchioness for land, saying that Estia was too blinded by profit and ignored humanity. Even if the nobles rebel against Diana, the empire's prince and the temple will closely protect her behind their backs. Estia began to think about what the temple held against her, and then remembered that initially, the most important role of the temple in this novel was to heal people, because only the aristocracy had doctors. And then the heroine realized that people would stop visiting the temple only if they stopped getting sick. And personal hygiene could help them in this. To share this idea, the Marchioness ran to her husband and explained that if people start washing their hands with soap, which was intended only for nobility, they will get sick much less often. And if you start making soap without essential oils or fine threads, then you can sell it cheaply to common people. It turned out that Estia suggested that Kael open a soap factory so that the fewest possible people would go to the temple, after which its position would begin to weaken. But it turned out that the heroine decided to solve everything herself, without involving her beloved in this. But since she is a Marchioness, she came to receive permission to act on Kael's behalf. And then the girl added that she also needed startup capital to open a new business, but that she did not have enough money for that. And then the Marquis explained to Estia that this would not be necessary because there was a functioning workshop in Ilion.